Hello everyone and welcome to Subreddit Dreams. I've been scouring the front pages and hidden gems of Reddit to bring you the most fascinating and unbelievable stories on the platform. If you love a great narrative as much as I do, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's get straight into the stories.
Story 1.
I worked hard, paid rent and bills, but when my mom gave away my room to her best friend's kids, I finally moved out and left her with the fallout. Living at home at 23 wasn't exactly what I had planned for my life, but it worked out for the most part. I wasn't freeloading or anything. I paid rent, covered the electricity bill, and even paid for my mom's phone plan. It's not like I was just lying around eating snacks and playing video games. Honestly, the deal was pretty good. I had my own space, got home-cooked meals, and could focus on my freelance work without worrying too much about big expenses. I had even turned my room into a mini studio for my content creation gigs, which I was hoping would take off soon. Everything was fine until my mom's best friend, Kelly, moved in with her 2 kids. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I understood the situation. Kelly was going through a nasty divorce, and her husband, according to my mom, was a complete jerk. They needed somewhere to stay, and our house was their best option. I thought it would be temporary, just a few weeks until Kelly got back on her feet. At first, they stayed in the guest room, and it wasn't a big deal. Sure, the kids were a little loud, but I just closed my door and put on my headphones. It wasn't ideal, but I could manage. The guest room wasn't huge, but it was enough for Kelly and her kids to crash in for a while. I figured that was the arrangement, and I didn't give it much thought. That changed fast. One day, I came home after running some errands and noticed something weird right away. My door was open, and I could hear kids laughing inside. When I walked in, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My bed was covered in toys. My desk chair was moved, and one of the kids was on my computer. My studio setup, my expensive microphone, lighting, and camera was shoved to the corner of the room like it didn't matter. Kelly's kids were running around like they owned the place, and all my stuff was just out of place. I yelled, "What the hell is going on?" Probably louder than I should have, but I was in shock. My mom walked in and immediately started scolding me like I was the one out of line. She said, "Calm your tits. It's not a big deal. The kids needed more space, and your room is the biggest. It's only fair." Fair? My room? The one I'm paying rent for? I told her I wanted them out of my room immediately, but she brushed me off like I was being ridiculous. She said, "They need to be comfortable. You're being selfish." Selfish? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about comfort, it was about respect. My room wasn't just a place I slept in, it was where I worked. My studio setup had cost me over $3,000, and it wasn't something I could just throw into a corner and ignore. I explained all of this, but my mom wasn't having it. She said, "They're just kids. They want to play on your computer. Stop making such a fuss." I shut that idea down immediately. I said, "In no way are they touching my equipment. If anything happens to it, I'm screwed." That's when Kelly chimed in. She said, "Oh, come on. They're just curious and you can't blame them. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, they'd listen to you." I was stunned. Uptight? I wasn't uptight. I was trying to protect my stuff. Stuff I worked hard for. I told her flat out that the kids weren't allowed to touch my things, and if they did, I'd hold her responsible. That didn't go over well. She called me selfish too, and my mom agreed with her. It was like I was suddenly the bad guy in my own home. After that first blow-up, the house got tense. I couldn't believe my mom and Kelly were siding against me, especially when I was the one paying rent. But I figured they'd realize how ridiculous this was after they calmed down. The next day, I tried talking to my mom again. I explained how much my studio equipment meant to me, not just financially, but professionally. Freelancing isn't just some hobby, it's my job. Without my gear, I couldn't do my work. and replacing it would take me months, maybe even years to save up for. I told her, "Mom, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this isn't fair. I'm paying rent for that room, and you just gave it away without even asking me." Her response? She said, "You're being dramatic. It's my house, and I decide what happens in it." I was stunned. My house? I pay rent. I'm contributing here, not just squatting for free. She shrugged like it didn't matter and said, "The kids need space. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's room is full of her things. Besides, your room has all that fancy stuff, and they like it better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My siblings, both 15, had rooms that were perfectly fine. Sure, my brother's room was smaller, but it was big enough for 2 kids. My sister's room was almost as big as mine, and honestly, she barely used it since she was always out with her friends. But my mom wouldn't even consider it. She said, "The kids love your room because it's cooler. All your fancy gadgets make it more fun for them." Fun? This wasn't about fun. My room wasn't some playhouse for Kelly's kids to mess around in. It was where I worked, where I relaxed, where I lived. I told her, "If they break anything, are you going to replace it? Because I can't afford to." That's when Kelly chimed in again. She said, "Stop being so paranoid. They're kids, not monsters. If you just let them play, they'd probably leave your stuff alone." I snapped. "Let them play on my $3,000 setup. Are you serious?" Kelly rolled her eyes and said, "You're being selfish. This is a hard time for us, and you're making it all about you." At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to my mom and said, "If they're staying in my room, I need to move my stuff out. I can't risk them damaging it." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Where are you going to put it? There's no space anywhere else." I asked, "So I'm just supposed to let them trash my stuff? How is that fair?" My mom just shook her head and said, "Life isn't fair. You're an adult. You should be able to handle a little inconvenience." A little inconvenience? Being kicked out of my own room wasn't a little inconvenience. It was disrespectful. I was paying rent for that space, and now I couldn't even use it. On top of that, I wasn't allowed to go into my room anymore. My mom said it was their space now, and I had no right to barge in. For the next few days, I tried to stay out of the house as much as possible. I'd hang out at coffee shops, trying to get work done on my laptop, but it wasn't the same without my studio setup. My productivity tanked. I was falling behind on deadlines, and my stress levels were through the roof. I tried one last time to reason with my mom. I said, "Look, I'll make a deal. Let me move my setup into the guest room, and they can stay in my room. That way, I can still work, and they can have the space they need." She didn't even think about it. She said, "No, the guest room is too cramped for all your stuff. You'll just have to wait until Kelly gets back on her feet." I asked, frustrated, "So, how long is that going to take?" She shrugged and said, "As long as it takes. You don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles." I couldn't believe this was happening. It wasn't like I hated Kelly or her kids. I understood they were going through a rough time, and I was willing to help. But this wasn't helping. It was enabling. Kelly wasn't paying anything to stay with us, and now I was basically being pushed out of my own life to accommodate them. Later that night, I overheard Kelly talking to my mom in the kitchen. She was complaining about me, calling me selfish and immature. She said, "He doesn't even understand how hard this is for us, or he's just being a brat." My mom agreed, saying he's always been stubborn. He'll get over it. That was the final straw. I realized they didn't care about me or my situation. I was just a paycheck to my mom and a roadblock to Kelly and her kids. They weren't going to listen, and they weren't going to change. The next day, I started looking for rooms to rent. It wasn't an easy decision. I loved living at home despite the occasional drama. It was affordable, and I got along with my siblings, but I couldn't stay in a place where I wasn't respected. After days of feeling like a stranger in my own home, I decided enough was enough. It wasn't just about the room anymore. It was about respect. I was paying rent, contributing to bills, and trying to build a future for myself. But none of that seemed to matter to my mom or Kelly. They had decided my needs came last, and I was tired of it. One night, I sat my mom down in the living room. My siblings were upstairs, and Kelly was putting her kids to bed, so it was just the two of us. I figured if I could make her see how serious I was, she'd finally listen. I started, keeping my voice calm. "Mom, we need to talk." She gave me a tired look and said, "What now?" I said, "I can't keep living like this. I've been paying rent for that room, and now I can't even use it. You gave it away without asking me, and it's not fair." She sighed and leaned back on the couch. She said, "We've been over this. It's temporary. Kelly and the kids are going through a hard time. You're young, and you can adapt." I shot back, "It's not about adapting, it's about respect. You didn't ask me. You just decided my room wasn't mine anymore, and now I can't even work because all my stuff is packed up or shoved into a corner." She said, waving me off, "Oh, you're being dramatic. This is my house, and I get to decide what happens in it." That line again. Every time she said it, it felt like a slap in the face. I said, "If this is your house, why am I paying rent? If you're going to treat me like a guest, maybe I shouldn't be paying anything at all." Her eyes narrowed. She said, "Don't you dare pull that. You know I need your help with the bills." I snapped. "Then treat me like I matter. You can't take my money every month and then turn around and tell me I have no say. That's not how this works." She looked at me like I was crazy and said, "What do you want me to do, throw Kelly and her kids out on the street? They have nowhere else to go." I shook my head and said, "No, but there are other options. They could stay in the guest room, or they could move into one of my siblings' rooms. Hell, you could even rotate rooms so everyone takes turns sharing the space. But taking my room and locking me out of it, that's not okay." She crossed her arms and said, "Your brother and sister are too young to share their rooms. And the guest room is too small for 3 people. Your room was the best option." I said, "No, it was the easiest option. You didn't want to deal with the hassle, so you dumped it on me." At that point, I could feel my frustration boiling over. I said, looking her straight in the eye, "I'll make this simple. Either Kelly and the kids move out of my room, or I move out of the house. Those are your options." She blinked, caught off guard, and said, "Don't be ridiculous. Where would you even go?" I told her, "I've already started looking for rooms to rent. If you're not going to respect me or the fact that I'm paying to live here, then I'll find somewhere else to live." She scoffed and said, "You're bluffing. You can't afford to move out." I leaned back, crossed my arms, and said, "Try me." The next few days were tense. I didn't bring up the ultimatum again, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. My mom didn't take me seriously, which just made me more determined. I spent every spare moment scrolling through rental listings, messaging landlords, and figuring out my budget. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could make it work if I cut back on non-essentials. Meanwhile, things at home were worse than ever. Kelly's kids had turned my room into their personal playground, and I couldn't do anything about it. I wasn't even allowed to step inside without someone throwing a fit. Once I tried to grab a few things I'd left behind, a pair of headphones and some books, and Kelly snapped at me. She demanded, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips, "What are you doing in here?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need my stuff." She shook her head and said, "You can't just barge in whenever you want. This is their room now." I stared at her, speechless. I said through gritted teeth, "Are you kidding me? This is my room." She said, her tone icy. "Not anymore. You need to respect their space." Respect their space? The irony nearly made me laugh. I said, "I'm paying rent for this room. I'll grab my stuff and leave, but don't tell me to respect their space when no one respects mine." She muttered something under her breath and walked away, but the damage was done. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this. My mom wasn't going to back me up, and Kelly wasn't going to change. If I wanted things to get better, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. A week after the ultimatum, I found a room for rent that I could afford. It wasn't anything fancy, a small place in an older building, but it was mine. The landlord was friendly, and the space was clean enough. Most importantly, I could set up my studio without worrying about kids touching my equipment. I didn't tell my mom right away. I wanted to make sure everything was finalized before I dropped the bombshell. When I signed the lease, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Moving out wasn't what I had planned, but staying wasn't an option anymore. I had to put myself first, even if it meant leaving behind the home I'd grown up in. The next step was moving my stuff out. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, especially with my mom and Kelly breathing down my neck. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing nice. Once I signed the lease for my new place, I knew I had to act fast. If I gave my mom too much notice, she'd find a way to make the move even harder. So I planned it out carefully. I told a few close friends what was going on, and 2 of them agreed to help me pack and move my stuff. One of them even offered to record everything on their phone just in case things got ugly. The night before the move, I sat down with my mom one last time. I wanted to give her one final chance to make things right. I started, keeping my voice calm. "Mom, I found a place to rent, and I'm moving out tomorrow." She looked up from her phone, surprised, and said, "You're really doing this?" I nodded and said, "Yeah." "You didn't leave me much choice." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're overreacting. This whole thing is temporary. You're leaving over nothing." I said firmly, "It's not nothing. You gave away my room, locked me out of it, and told me I didn't have a say in the matter. I'm paying rent, and you treated me like I was just disposable." She sighed like I was exhausting her and said, "You know I need your rent money to keep this house running. If you leave, how am I supposed to pay the bills?" I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I said, "That's not my problem anymore. You made it clear that this isn't my house. You said it's your house, your rules. Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stay here." She glared at me and said, "So, you're just going to leave us high and dry?" I shrugged and said, "You can ask Kelly to start paying rent or her husband since they're still married. I don't owe you anything." She didn't say anything after that. She just gave me a cold look and went back to her phone. I took that as my cue to leave. The next day, my friends showed up bright and early with a couple of cars and a rented van. We were ready to get everything done as quickly as possible. I'd already packed most of my stuff into boxes, but I still had to get my studio set up out of my old room. When we got to the house, Kelly and her kids were already awake. The kids were running around the living room, and Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She gave me a suspicious look as soon as I walked in and asked, narrowing her eyes, "What's going on?" I said simply, I'm moving out." Her eyebrows shot up, and she said, "Seriously, you're leaving because of this? That's pathetic." I ignored her and headed upstairs to my room, or what used to be my room. When I opened the door, the sight almost made me sick. My bed was covered in stuffed animals and toys, and my desk was piled high with random junk. My computer, microphone, and camera were shoved into a corner, looking like they hadn't been touched in weeks. I turned to one of my friends and said, "Start recording." He pulled out his phone and began filming as I carefully started packing up my equipment. Kelly must have realized what was happening because she came upstairs and started yelling. She shouted, "You can't just barge in here and start taking stuff. This is their room now." I turned to her, trying to stay calm, and said, "It's my stuff, Kelly. I paid for it, and I'm taking it with me." She crossed her arms and said, "You're being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space." I said, my voice steady, "This isn't a tantrum. This is me standing up for myself. You and my mom have treated me like I don't matter, and I'm done with it." She started yelling again, but I tuned her out and kept packing. My friends helped me load everything into the van while one of them kept filming just in case Kelly or my mom tried to pull something. By the time we finished, my mom had come upstairs to see what was going on. When she saw the empty room, she flipped out. She asked, her voice shaking with anger, "You're really doing this? You're leaving us just because you didn't get your way?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I'm leaving because you didn't respect me. I paid rent for this room, and you gave it away without even asking. You made it clear that I'm not a priority here, so I'm making myself a priority." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand and said, "Don't. I've made my decision." As I carried the last box out to the van, Kelly stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, glaring at me. She said sarcastically, "Good luck out there. You're going to realize how selfish you've been when things get hard." I didn't even bother responding. I just climbed into the van and drove off with my friends. That night, after I'd moved into my new place and started unpacking, my phone blew up with texts from my mom. She was furious, saying I was selfish and inconsiderate for leaving her in a tough spot. She accused me of abandoning the family and leaving her to deal with the bills on her own. One text read, "You've always been so selfish. I can't believe you did this to me after everything I've done for you." I typed out a response but deleted it. I didn't owe her an explanation. She'd made her choices, and now I was making mine. After moving into my new place, the first thing I felt was relief. No more fighting, no more disrespect, and most importantly, no more feeling like I didn't matter. Sure, my new room was smaller, and the building wasn't exactly top-notch, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I unpacked my studio equipment first, carefully setting it up in the corner of my room. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But the peace didn't last long. My mom started texting me the next morning, blowing up my phone with message after message. She wanted to know if I'd paid rent for the month yet. When I told her I wasn't paying since I had moved out, she lost it. She texted, "You haven't even reached the 25th yet. You owe me for the rest of this month." I rolled my eyes and replied, "No, I don't. I'm not living there anymore, so I'm not paying rent. You can ask Kelly to cover it." Her response came almost instantly. She texted, "Kelly doesn't have money to pay rent, or you know that. You're leaving me to handle everything on my own, and I can't afford it." I texted back, "That's not my problem. You made it clear that it's your house, your rules. Well, now it's your bills, your responsibility. She didn't like that answer. She started calling me selfish, immature, and ungrateful. According to her, I was tearing the family apart by leaving. At first, the guilt started creeping in. I'd always helped out financially, and I knew my contributions had made a big difference. But then I reminded myself why I'd left in the first place. My mom had treated me like I was disposable, so why should I feel bad for putting myself first? The next week, the guilt trips turned into anger. My mom sent long, rambling texts about how I was ruining everything. One text read, "You've embarrassed me. Everyone in the family is asking why you left, and I don't know what to tell them." I didn't bother replying. I knew whatever I said would just fuel the fire. Instead, I focused on settling into my new place. I caught up on work, got my studio fully functional again, and started feeling like myself. It was amazing how much better I felt without all the chaos and negativity weighing me down. A few days later, my sister called me out of the blue. I hadn't heard much from her since I moved out, so I figured she wanted to check in, but as soon as I picked up, I realized she had a different agenda. She said, skipping the small talk, "Mom's really upset. She says you're not paying rent this month, and now she's freaking out about the bills." I said, keeping my tone calm, "I'm not living there anymore. Why should I pay rent for a place I'm not living in?" My sister argued, "You know she can't afford it without you. You've always helped out. Why stop now?" I said bluntly, because she didn't respect me. She gave away my room, locked me out of it, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm done being taken advantage of. My sister sighed and said, "It's not that simple. Kelly's going through a lot, and Mom's just trying to help." I said, "I get that, but why does helping Kelly mean screwing me over? I was paying rent for that room. I had every right to keep it," she said weakly. "She didn't mean to screw you over, she's just stressed." I shot back, "So am I, but no one cared about that when I was being pushed out of my own room." She didn't have much to say after that. We talked for a few more minutes, mostly about her school stuff, and then hung up. I could tell she was stuck in the middle, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into changing my mind. As the days went on, the texts from my mom started tapering off. I think she realized I wasn't going to budge, but then she pulled one last stunt that made me glad I'd left. One morning, I woke up to a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. It said, "I heard about the drama with your mom. Are you okay?" Confused, I asked what they were talking about. That's when they sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom had made. In it, she painted me as the villain, claiming I'd abandoned her and the family during their time of need. She left out the part where she gave my room away, of course, and made it sound like I'd left out of sheer spite. I was furious. It was one thing to argue with me privately, but airing our dirty laundry online was too far. I didn't respond to the post, though. I figured it wasn't worth the effort. Let her play the victim if that's what she needed to do. I knew the truth, and so did the people who actually mattered. Now, a month later, I'm fully settled into my new place. My work is back on track, my stress levels are way down, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I keep the conversation short and stick to neutral topics. I've learned to set boundaries, and I'm not letting her guilt trip me anymore. Do I feel bad about leaving sometimes? Yeah. It sucks that things had to end this way, but I don't regret my decision. I deserve respect, and if my mom couldn't give me that, then I had to find it elsewhere. Moving out was the best thing I could have done for myself, and I'm not looking back. Was I wrong for leaving and refusing to pay rent for the rest of the month? I don't think so. I tried to be reasonable, but my mom made it clear that I didn't matter as much as Kelly and her kids. At the end of the day, I had to put myself first. If that makes me selfish, so be it.
Story 2.
The C-130's engines wind down and the ramp dropped onto the tarmac at Fort Bragg. A year in the sand gone. Just like that. I slung my duffel over my shoulder and walked into the hangar, scanning the crowd of families. Then I saw her. Sarah. My wife. She was backlit by the North Carolina sun, looking like an angel in a white sundress. She ran to me and I dropped my gear, catching her in my arms. I buried my face in her hair. She smelled like home. Like freshly cut grass and the lavender soap she always used. I missed you so much, she whispered into my chest. It's over, I said. I'm home. For good. The first week was a blur of perfect moments. We slept in, made love, and talked for hours about the future. The farm was thriving, the house was immaculate. My life was a blueprint I'd drawn myself, and everything was exactly where it should be. We were going to start trying for a baby right now. The first crack in the foundation appeared on a Tuesday. I was looking for a spare charging cable in the junk drawer in the kitchen. Underneath a tangle of old cords and dead batteries was her old phone, the one she said had shattered when she dropped it 6 months ago. Except it wasn't shattered. A long crack spiderwebbed across the screen, but it was intact. Curiosity is a bastard. I plugged it in. The screen lit up. A passcode. I tried her birthday. No luck. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried 1, 2, 3, 4. It opened. Her texts were still there. A 6-month-long conversation with a contact named Ryder. I started at the beginning. Asterisk. Ryder fence posts are in. Head in. Out. Asterisk. Asterisk. Sarah already. Stay. Have a beer with me. Asterisk. He was the handyman she'd hired to fix up the back 40 while I was gone. The cowboy, she'd called him. A good old boy married with a baby on the way. Just a friendly guy. I kept scrolling. The text went from friendly to flirty. Flirty to filthy. Asterisk. Ryder. Can't stop thinking about you. Asterisk. Asterisk. Sarah, then come back over. He's thousands of miles away. Asterisk. My thumb swiped faster, a slick of sweat on the screen. The words blurred into a single cohesive nightmare. I saw their first kiss described in detail. Their first time in my truck. Then in my barn. Then in my bed. Asterisk. Sarah, I love you. I've never felt this way about anyone. Asterisk. Asterisk. Ryder, I love you too. More than her. Asterisk. Her. His pregnant wife. Then I saw the text that stopped my heart. Asterisk. Sarah. Last night was amazing. I love feeling you inside me with nothing between us. Asterisk. Unprotected. While we were planning to start a family, my family, the bile rose in my throat. I ran to the bathroom and heaved into the toilet until there was nothing left. I sat on the cold tile, the phone still clutched in my hand. They had planned a future. He was going to leave his wife after the baby was born. She was going to leave me the day I got home. They'd sell his place and live here. On my farm. In my house. The front door opened. Alan, honey, I'm home. I splashed water on my face and shoved the phone deep into my pocket. I walked out of the bathroom and forced a smile. My military training kicked in. Compartmentalize, suppress, survive. Hey, I said, my voice steady. How was your day? She kissed me. It felt like poison. Great, I was thinking we could grill steaks tonight. Celebrate. Celebrate what? Just you being home, she said, beaming. Us. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. I lived a double life. On the outside, I was the happy returning husband. I went to the gym, I worked on the farm, I smiled at dinner. On the inside, I was a ghost. At night, I'd lie next to her staring at the ceiling, replaying their texts in my head. Some nights, I'd go to my gun safe, open it, and just look at my service pistol. The thought was a cool, dark comfort. A final way out. But I'd slam the safe shut, my whole body shaking. She never noticed a thing. She'd curl up against me, talking about baby names. Finn for a boy, Olivia for a girl. She wanted to paint the spare bedroom a soft yellow. My stoicism started to fray. One afternoon, I was in the workshop trying to fix a generator. My hands were trembling, my breath caught in my chest. The walls felt like they were closing in. I slid down the wall, gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The door creaked open. It was Sarah. Alan, oh my God, what's wrong? She knelt beside me. I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head. Is it your new pre-workout stuff? She asked, her voice dripping with concern. I told you that stuff was too strong. You need to be more careful. She helped me up, leading me into the house like a child, completely oblivious. She saw a panic attack and blamed it on creatine. It wasn't a lack of perception. It was a complete refusal to see. That was it. That was the moment I went from victim to soldier. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Then I hired a private investigator, an old army buddy who owed me a favor. I just need to know if it's still happening, I told him. Confirmation. 2 days later, Sarah kissed me goodbye. I'm meeting Stephanie for lunch, and then we're going shopping. I'll be back around 5. Love you. Love you too, I said. The words tasted like ash. I spent the afternoon cleaning my rifles, taking them apart, oiling the pieces, putting them back together. A calm, methodical task. A focus for the rage. My phone buzzed. A text from the PI. It was a picture. Grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Sarah getting out of her car in a Target parking lot. She was smiling, walking toward a dusty Ford F-250. Ryder's truck. He was leaning against the driver's side door, grinning back at her. The picture was time-stamped 5 minutes ago. My stomach twisted into a knot of ice. She was with him. Right now. My phone buzzed again. A new text. From Sarah. Asterisk, having so much fun with Steph, we're trying on dresses. Wish you were here, miss you already, XOXO asterisk. I stared at the 2 messages on my screen, stacked one on top of the other. A picture of my wife meeting her lover. A lie about shopping with a friend. The world didn't explode. It just went silent and sharp like the moment after a flashbang goes off. The ringing in my ears stopped. The fog in my head cleared. There was only the mission. I didn't text back. I didn't call. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and opened the junk drawer. I took out her old phone, the cracked repository of my own personal hell, and plugged it in. I photographed the screen with my phone, capturing the worst of it. The I love yous. The plans for my house. The text about unprotected sex. I saved the PI's picture. Then I went on Facebook. It took me less than 5 minutes to find Ryder's profile. His wife's name was Chloe. Her profile picture was a maternity shot, her hands cradling a perfect round belly. Her public posts were full of excitement about their baby boy. My finger hovered over her name. I copied the link to her profile. Then I sat in my armchair in the living room and waited. It was the easiest thing I'd done in months. There was no rage, no sorrow, just a cold, hard sense of purpose. An objective to be taken. The front door opened a little after 5. "I'm home," she sang, dropping shopping bags by the door. You would not believe the sale they had at Belk. She came over and leaned down to kiss me. I turned my head so her lips landed on my cheek. She frowned. "Everything okay?" "Where were you today, Sarah?" I asked. My voice was flat, devoid of everything. "I told you with Stephanie. Shopping." The lie came so easily, so practiced. "That's funny," I said, not looking at her. "Because Stephanie posted a picture of her and her kids at the zoo this afternoon. She tagged her mom. Said they were spending the whole day together." The air in the room changed. The pressure dropped. "Oh, well, we just went for a bit in the morning and then..." She started the lies already tangling. I held up my phone, showing her the PI's photo. Her smiling face walking toward Ryder's truck. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You're still seeing him?" I said. It wasn't a question. "Alan, it's not what it looks like. We just met for coffee to talk? For closure?" "Closure," I repeated the word. It tasted like dirt. "While you were texting me about trying on dresses..." "I didn't want you to worry. I knew how it would look," she cried, the tears already starting to well. "It meant nothing, I swear. It's over. I chose you." I watched her a specimen under glass. The performance was flawless. The panicked regret, the pleading eyes. It was all a lie. I had read the script. I knew how the story was supposed to end. With me gone. "I see," I said. I picked up my phone. I had already drafted the message. I created a new group text. I added Sarah, her mom, her dad, her sister Emily, and Chloe Ryder's pregnant wife. I attached the 5 screenshots. The photo from the parking lot. The text about loving him more than me. The plan to take my farm. The one about having unprotected sex. And the picture of her lying texts from this afternoon. I didn't add a single word of my own. I just hit send. A moment of silence hung in the air. Then the buzz. Her phone on the entryway table. My phone in my hand. Her face went from pale to sheet white as she grabbed her phone. Her eyes darted across the screen, the realization dawning. Her phone began to ring. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. She ignored it. It rang again. Her father. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury that had nothing to do with remorse. "What did you do?" I told the truth, I said, standing up. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. You sent that to Chloe." "Are you insane? She's pregnant." "And you were sleeping with her husband. Unprotected. Did you think about her then?" She collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. "It was just a fling. Alan A. Mistake. We can fix this. I can fix this." My phone rang. It was her father. I put it on speaker. "Alan, what the hell is this? You're airing our dirty laundry to everyone," he boomed. "Your daughter's been having an affair for 6 months, Bill. I thought you should know." "For Christ's sake, son, you were gone a year. What did you expect?" "A woman has needs," he yelled. "You've always been so..." distant. You can't just shut down and expect her to wait around forever. I heard her mother in the background. This is your fault, Alan. You pushed her to this. I looked at Sarah. She wasn't protesting. She was just sitting there letting them defend her. Letting them blame me. I clicked the phone off and dropped it on the table. Get your things, I said. I want you out, tonight. The divorce was filed the next day. The battle lines were drawn. Her family treated me like a leper. My friends, the ones who had been there when I put on the uniform and when I took it off, circled the wagons. They brought me beer and takeout, sat with me in silence on the porch, and never once told me I should have seen it coming. Sarah sent me desperate texts. Asterisk. Please. Let's go to counseling. I'll do anything to make this right. I still love you. Asterisk. It was all noise. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my PI sent me one final email free of charge. It was a screenshot of Sarah's updated LinkedIn profile and a confirmation of a submitted application. A job in Austin, Texas, Ryder's hometown. She was pleading for our marriage with one hand and planning her escape with the other. The divorce was brutally, blessedly fast. She didn't fight for the house or the farm. She couldn't. It was all mine before she ever came into the picture. She took her car, her clothes, and the life she had built on lies, and she was gone. I heard through the grapevine that Ryder's wife had the baby, a healthy boy, and filed for divorce the following week, moving back to her parents' house. The first few months alone were quiet. The kind of quiet that buzzes. I'd walk the property, I'd cleared stand in the house I'd built, and feel like a ghost. I had been dismantled bolt by bolt down to the concrete slab of my foundation. There were nights the gun safe still called to me, a dark whisper in the silence. But one morning I woke up and the first thing I thought about wasn't her. It was the split rail fence that needed mending by the creek. I got up, made coffee, and went to work. My hands felt steady. The sun on my back felt warm. I had been so focused on being the rock, the stoic soldier, the self-sufficient man. I thought vulnerability was a liability, a weakness to be trained out of you. I was wrong. Vulnerability is what's left when the bullshit is burned away. It's the foundation. Faith, my friends, my own two hands, that's what I rebuilt on. I don't know what happened to her or to him, and I don't care. Their story is over. Mine is just beginning again. The blueprint of my life was shattered, but the land is still here. And for the first time in a long time, I'm free to build whatever I want.
Story 3.
My wife was invited to a company ball. It was really fancy, so ballroom attire was required. 2 weeks prior to the ball, she started to get really anxious about everything. She even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. She said if I would rather stay home and relax, that would be fine. She usually begged me to go places with her. And if I insisted on staying home, then she gave me a list of chores to do. The fact that she offered me the idea of relaxation was weird. I told her I was going, and she could relax about it. When it got close to the day of the ball, my wife was using her phone excessively. She never told me why, and I didn't feel welcome to ask. We were in the car at one point, and her phone connected to the Bluetooth, and she freaked out. She started pushing the power button a few times when the Bluetooth didn't disconnect. Her face turned really red, and she just started looking out the window. It was so worrisome. What was she so paranoid about me seeing? She went into the store and couldn't have been too paranoid because her phone was laying on her seat. I decided to look through it. I didn't find anything interesting in the texts, so I checked her email, and an opened email said she had test results to see on her doctor's website. I looked, and it was a test result positive for an incurable STD. I could not believe what I was reading and the magnitude of what I just found. I wondered if she was planning to tell me anytime soon.
We hadn't had sex in 3 months, the longest we ever went. These results were dated from 4 days ago. Did I have what she had? My mind was reeling when my wife started running back to the car with groceries. I thought I had enough time to check one more thing. I did a search in her apps for WhatsApp and boom, she had it. I opened it and saw a string of texts to a man named Michael. The only Michael I knew she was associated with was her boss. I locked her phone and put it on her seat. She got in the car and was relieved to see her phone. She said she wasn't sure if she dropped it and looked at me closely for a few seconds while she tried to figure out if I looked through it. I put on my best poker face and drove us home. We arrived at the ball before I had another chance to check her phone. I didn't sleep with her and I didn't ask her anything. I wanted to know when she was planning to tell me this terrible news. I already considered the possibility of her cheating on me because I didn't think I had the same thing she did, but I couldn't know for sure until I got tested. Why, unless she was cheating on me, would she hesitate to tell me this diagnosis? All of this was going through my head as we entered the ball. We had seats at a table, which is where my wife set down her little handheld purse. I thought about trying to sneak a peek at her phone. We were greeted by her boss personally. He kissed my wife's hand and told her he was so glad she was there. She introduced me to him unenthusiastically, and he greeted me with the same level of dismissal. He asked me if he could have the first dance with my lovely wife, and I felt like I didn't have a choice. Besides, I wanted to look at my wife's phone. While she danced with him, it looked like they were whispering to themselves. It was weird, and I had just about enough. I started looking through my wife's phone without any care if she saw me. I opened her WhatsApp and discovered that Michael confirmed precisely what time we would get here, and scrolling up just a bit more showed that they planned to sneak away as soon as I went to the bathroom or stepped outside for a smoke. I looked up at them in shock. They were at the bar getting drinks now. I looked through more of her messages with him, talking about the sex they've had and how they want to have it again. My wife even mentioned her recent diagnosis to him, and he apologized for not telling her about it. She freaked out over text, asking him how she was supposed to tell her husband she suddenly had an incurable STD after 7 years of marriage. He offered that perhaps she wouldn't ever need to tell me if she just left me for him. I took screenshots of it all and sent the collection to my phone. Then I used her phone to post it all on her social media platforms. She was friends with people all over this ballroom. I saw people looking at their phones, gasping, and then looking up to find my wife or the boss. I included a few messages of slander towards their coworkers and employees. I watched someone urgently alert the boss to a problem, and he left the ballroom to talk about it. My wife was left alone, so she started walking back towards our table. She looked extremely uncomfortable, like she noticed something was wrong, and people were staring at her. I stared at her too, fake smiling with my hands folded in front of me. She greeted me skeptically. I simply said, "I'm going to file for divorce because you are no longer my wife." Her jaw dropped and she sat next to me, asking me what was going on. I handed her back her phone and told her to check what she posted a few minutes ago. She was really confused and looked at me like I wasn't making sense. When she opened her phone, I saw the moment of agony show up on her face. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth. She realized her boss was most likely fired, which meant she would be fired. She realized everyone in the room was staring at her because they now knew, officially, not speculating, that she was sleeping with the boss, and both of them had an STD. How despicable and disgusting. She ugly cried while she grabbed her stuff and left the hotel, heading for my car. I followed her slowly, nodding in acknowledgement to every person that eyed me up. I had the keys in my pocket, and I was not giving her a ride to my house. When I got to the car, she was standing there with her arms crossed. I asked her what she thought she was doing. She said she wanted to get in the car and go home. I asked her if she meant her parents' house or her boss' house. She looked at me, shocked and upset. She asked me not to do this and said I couldn't be serious. I said I would show her how serious I was, that she was never coming back to my house or getting in my car again. I unlocked my door, only got in and locked it again. She was screaming at me to let her in, but it quickly turned to desperate sobbing. A crowd gathered outside the hotel, watching us by our car. They all knew she was the one sleeping with the boss. She was the one with the STD. She gave up on trying to get in the car with me and opted for sprinting into the woods lining the parking lot. I drove home. I didn't care what happened to her anymore. I scheduled a doctor's appointment the next day. It was 3 days later that I got back my test results, which thankfully said I was clean. I also heard my ex's boss was fired. As soon as her boss got an opportunity to sneak away from the intense scrutiny he faced, he packed his bags and left. On the way, he stopped to pick up my ex. They haven't returned to town since then. I put all my ex's belongings outside between 2 tarps. That was more consideration than she ever gave me. However, she never returned for it. My most helpful support through the breakup was my dog. Also heard my ex was dumped by Michael after 5 months. Wow, OP. What a glamorous place to discover the disturbing secrets your wife hid from you. It was lucky that she put down her phone so you could expose their infidelity and shameful behavior to everyone they associated with. It's so lucky you didn't sleep with her before discovering the truth. It's also lucky you weren't tricked into raising an affair child. She behaved like a succubus, probably choosing to sleep with her boss because he was wealthy. A woman that does this can never be trusted. She doesn't have the right values in life and probably never will unless she's humbled by the challenges of life. It sounds like she definitely went through some hardships brought on by her actions. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in life, OP. Now let's get into today's second story. My girlfriend, 22, had a job babysitting for this one really nice family we both knew from church. They were wealthy, so spending time in their house wasn't really a chore. To make things even better, their younger kids were really well behaved and went to sleep easily. She had me, 25, come over a few times while she was babysitting and the kids were in bed. We never did the hokey pokey or anything, although it felt like we could have gotten away with it. This family had an older son named John. He was 18, but they didn't usually have him babysit because he was always up to something or at hockey practice. One time while she was babysitting, my girlfriend randomly stopped responding to my texts. I thought something was seriously wrong. She already told me the kids were asleep, but I guessed there was a small chance one of them woke up again. I waited an hour and didn't hear anything. I decided to drive over there to check it out. At first, nothing appeared to be wrong. No flashing police lights or anything scary like that. I walked up the path to the front door and noticed an odd movement through the window. I cupped my hands around my face to see into the living room through a tiny gap in the blinds. I was shocked to see John having sex with my girlfriend. I turned away and tried to open the front door, but it was locked. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway in a hurry. It barely stopped before the door opened and John's dad jumped out. I put my hands up instinctually and said I just got here. John's dad paid me no mind at all. He just rushed to the front door and unlocked it in a hurry. He barged in, followed by John's mom, asking what the hell they thought they were doing. My girlfriend screamed and John yelled. His dad told him to get out of the house. He was not allowed to have unprotected premarital sex in their home, with his younger siblings asleep upstairs. He asked them how terrible it would have been if the kids came downstairs and found them having sex. He looked to my girlfriend, who had only managed to get her underwear back on, and told her she was supposed to be the responsible adult in this situation, and she failed miserably. It was then that my girlfriend noticed I was standing in the doorway. She burst into tears and put the rest of her clothes on. She apologized sincerely to John's dad, mom, and me before she got in her car and left. I realized I had no place there, now that my cheating girlfriend left the scene. Just as I was about to leave, John's mom followed me outside, closing the front door behind her to muffle the yelling between John and his dad. She apologized to me for what I was going through. She reminded me that the end of one relationship doesn't have to be the end of the world. I thanked her and asked how they knew what was happening at the house. She said they had a hidden camera in the living room that connected to their cell phones. They'd see me every time I was at their house, but since they knew I was a well-behaved man, they didn't mind me hanging out with my girlfriend. They actually felt their kids were safer when I was there too. I told my parents everything that happened. I lived on my own at this point, but I needed their support. They told me I didn't need to ever speak to my girlfriend again. She proved herself unfit to be a wife. Just then, she called me. She told me she would never make this mistake again. I believed her, but that didn't mean I wanted her back. I asked her why she did it and what happened. She just told me that after John came home, he started talking with her and after a while, asked point blank if she wanted to have sex. She gave in, not really thinking too hard about it. It hurt to hear that. How could she just not think about it? She gave in to her primal instincts with little resistance, assuming she wouldn't get caught. It was so unfair to me, her loving boyfriend. I was loyal to her, even when a woman from my job came on to me. Well, that phone call was all I needed to officially decide I wasn't going to stay with her anymore. I told her on the same phone call, "All right, well, it was nice knowing you, but our time together has come to an end. I wish you the best," and hung up. It wasn't very long until she tried to call me again. Several times, but I never answered. John's parents had told my ex's parents and the church that they caught her having sex in their house while she was supposed to be babysitting. I didn't keep up with my ex since, but heard she moved out of town. OP, I am so sorry you went through the worry and panic and found your girlfriend cheating. It's a shame she didn't treat that family, you, and herself with more respect. It doesn't sound like she's mature enough for a serious relationship or job. You made the right decision to seek support and leave her. A good partner would never do anything to jeopardize their relationship, even if, supposedly, no one is watching. I wish you the best of luck going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.
Story 4.
The first week was fine. Sort of. Having my daughter Madison back home felt right. She's only 20 and holding her baby girl, my granddaughter Lily, just felt like the proper order of things. A house is supposed to have a baby in it sometimes. But our house had forgotten the language of newborns. It only spoke Ryan. Ryan is 11. He operates at 2 speeds, asleep and tornado. He's got ADHD that his doctor calls profound. I just call it Ryan. It's the way his brain is wired. He's not a bad kid. He's a good kid in a body that won't stop moving, with a mouth that won't stop talking, and a mind that ricochets from one thought to the next like a bullet in a tin can. The first incident was predictable. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Madison shuffled in her face pale and her eyes looking like 2 burnt holes in a blanket. "Dad." Her voice was a rasp. "You have to talk to him." "Talk to who? What's wrong?" "Ryan," she said, her voice cracking. "He just barreled into my room screaming about some new skin he got on Fortnite." Lily was finally asleep. Asterisk. Finally, asterisk. I sighed. I could already picture it. Ryan vibrating with an excitement he physically couldn't contain, forgetting everything else in the universe, except that one glorious singular thought he needed to share. Time's right now. Asterisk. "Okay, Maddie. I'll talk to him." She just stared at me, her arms crossed tight over a milk-stained t-shirt. A talk isn't going to do anything. He needs a consequence. I'll handle it. I found Ryan in his room, headphones on, body contorting as he dodged imaginary laser fire. I tapped his shoulder. He ripped the headphones off. "Dad, you should have seen it. I got the last guy with a no-scope from the top of the tower. It was insane. That's great, buddy. Hey, listen. You gotta remember to be quiet. Your niece is sleeping and you woke her up. His face fell for a second. Genuine remorse flickered in his eyes. Oh, I forgot. Sorry. It's okay. Just try to remember, all right? Knock first. Quietly. Okay, Dad. I will. He put his headphones back on, and the world outside of his screen immediately ceased to exist again. I went back downstairs. Madison was waiting, leaning against the counter, her expression unchanged. I talked to him. I said, pouring my coffee? And he said he's sorry. He forgot. Madison let out a laugh that was sharp and humorless. He forgot. Of course he forgot. He's always going to forget, Dad. That's the problem. Madison, what do you want from me? I said, my own patience starting to fray. He has ADHD. His brain doesn't work like yours. He can't help how he behaves. It's not malicious. You of all people should know that. I'm not saying it's malicious, she shot back, her voice rising. I'm saying it's disruptive. I'm saying I haven't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch in 2 weeks, and every time I get her down, he blows it up. I need your help. I need you to be a parent. The jab landed. I am being a parent. To both of my kids. That includes the one who needs a little more understanding. He's your brother. Cut him some slack. She just shook her head, a tear of pure exhaustion rolling down her cheek. Just try to keep him away from my door. Please. I tried. God, I tried. But telling Ryan to be quiet is like telling the ocean not to have waves. For the next week, it was a constant battle. Ryan, indoor voice. Ryan, stop running in the hall. Ryan, for the love of God, don't slam the door. Each time he'd give me that same look of brief, sincere regret. Sorry, Dad. And 5 minutes later, he'd be bouncing off the walls again, the promise vaporized by the next impulse. Madison started putting a chair under her doorknob. It didn't work. Ryan, thinking the door was just stuck, would jiggle and yank it until the chair scraped across the floor with a screech that was worse than him just opening it. Or he'd just bang on the wood. Maddie, you in there? The internet's down. The noise always woke the baby. The house grew thick with the tension you could taste. Madison stopped talking to me, communicating only in sharp, single-word answers. She looked haunted. Lily was always fussy, now overtired and miserable. Her cries were a constant grating soundtrack in the background of our lives. I felt Madison's anger radiating through the floorboards. And it made me angry too. I was doing my best. I was juggling a sleep-deprived daughter with a newborn and a special needs son. Why couldn't she see I was on her side, on both her sides? She was making it seem like I had to choose. This afternoon, a miracle happened. Silence. Lily had been screaming for 3 solid hours. A painful, colicky shriek that felt like it was drilling into my skull. I watched Madison pace the living room with her bouncing, shushing her face, a mask of desperation. Finally, around 4 o'clock, the crying stopped. Madison stood frozen in the middle of the room for a full minute listening. Then she crept up the stairs with the stealth of a bomb squad technician. I sank into the recliner, the sudden quiet roaring in my ears. I turned on the TV, keeping the volume on a whisper. Ryan was in his room, hopefully engrossed in his game. For the first time all day, I felt my shoulders unclench. Maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe things would be okay. I closed my eyes just for a second, soaking in the peace. That's when I heard it. A loud, triumphant shout from upstairs. Yes, level up! It was Ryan. His voice, unfiltered and explosive, echoed through the quiet house. It was followed a half-second later by a sound that made every nerve in my body stand on end. The frantic, piercing wail of a startled baby. But there was another sound too. A sound I'd never heard from my daughter before. It wasn't a cry or a complaint. It was a roar. A gut-wrenching scream of pure spent fury that was more animal than human. Ryan. The sound of her bedroom door slamming open cracked like a gunshot, so hard I felt the vibration through the floor. The baby's cries pitched higher, mingling with Madison's enraged, incoherent shouting. I heard a thud, then a sharp hurt yelp from my son. My blood ran cold. I dropped the remote and launched myself out of the chair, my heart pounding against my ribs as I took the stairs 2 at a time. I got to the top of the stairs just as Madison lunged, not at Ryan, but at her own bedroom door, slamming it shut. Ryan was on the floor in the hallway, curled up and sobbing. The baby's screams were now muffled, a desperate, frantic sound from behind the closed door. "What the hell did you do?" I bellowed at the door. I knelt beside Ryan, putting my hands on his shaking shoulders. "Buddy, are you okay? Did she push you?" He looked up at me, his face red and streaked with tears. I just wanted to tell her about the V-Bucks I earned. I forgot to knock." The door flew open again. Madison stood there, a wild look in her eyes. She wasn't holding Lily. He didn't forget to knock, Dad. He forgot he was a person. He kicked the door open because the chair was under the knob and screamed in his loudest voice 2 feet from her bassinet. On purpose. It wasn't on purpose, Ryan wailed. It was an accident. I stood up, putting myself between Madison and my son. I pointed a finger at her. I don't care what he did. Look at him. There's no excuse for making your brother cry like that. None. Her mouth fell open. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief. No excuse. Are you listening to yourself? He's a little terror he needs to learn, but you won't ever teach him because it's easier to just let him run wild and call it ADHD. Don't you dare, I said, my voice dangerously low. Don't you dare use his condition against him. You have no idea what it's like for him, the battles he fights in his own head every single second. And you have no idea what it's like for me, she screamed, tears finally breaking free and carving paths through her makeup. I'm drowning, Dad, and instead of throwing me a life raft, you're holding my head underwater to make sure your precious son doesn't get his feet wet. That's when I snapped. The exhaustion, the constant noise, her ingratitude, it all boiled over. My precious son, you mean the one who was here long before you decided to show up on my doorstep with a baby and nowhere else to go? You knew what this house was like. You knew who Ryan was. If you couldn't handle your brother, maybe you should have thought of that 9 months ago? The words hung in the air, ugly and heavy. The wildness in her eyes died, replaced by something colder, sharper. Something I'd never seen before. So this is a punishment, she said, her voice flat. For needing my father. This isn't a punishment, this is reality. This is my house. Ryan lives here, and I will not have him treated like a villain because his brain is wired differently. If you can't deal with that, I said the final fatal words, tumbling out before I could stop them, then you can get out. For a long moment, she just stared at me. The baby's cries from inside the room were the only sound. Madison didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Then she turned, walked back into her room, and closed the door behind her with a soft, final click. I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering. I got Ryan up and took him to his room, told him it wasn't his fault that Maddie was just tired. He sniffled and booted up his game, the crisis already fading from his mind. I went downstairs, my hands still shaking with adrenaline. I felt a surge of righteousness. I had defended my son. The one who couldn't defend himself. Madison was an adult. She'd get over it. She'd realize she was wrong to scream at a kid, her own brother. She'd come down and apologize. I poured a glass of whiskey, sank into my recliner, and waited for the apology that was surely coming. An hour passed. The only sound was the clicking of Ryan's keyboard upstairs. The baby had finally blessedly gone quiet. Then I heard it. Not shouting, not crying. A different sound. The methodical scrape of a drawer opening. A soft thud. Another drawer. It was the sound of packing. I sat up straight, the whiskey souring in my stomach. She was bluffing. Just trying to make me feel guilty. It was petty. It was manipulative. I wasn't going to fall for it. But the sounds continued. The distinct zip of a duffel bag. The muffled click of hangers being pulled from a closet rod. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Madison, I called up. No answer. Maddie, don't be dramatic. Silence. My righteousness began to curdle into a sick, creeping dread. I walked up the stairs and stood in her open doorway. Suitcases I hadn't seen in years were open on her bed. She was folding tiny onesies and sleepers into neat stacks, her movements calm and deliberate. She didn't look at me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice weaker than I intended. She picked up a stack of diapers and placed them in a bag. "Madison, stop this. You're overreacting. We can talk about this." She zipped a bag shut and slung it over her shoulder. Then she picked up another. She moved past me out of the room, as if I were a piece of furniture. I followed her downstairs, my feet feeling like lead. She set the bags by the front door. "Where are you going to go?" I demanded. "It's almost dark." "Don't be stupid." She ignored me, heading back upstairs. I heard her moving around then. She came back down holding Lily's car seat in one hand. The baby was asleep inside a tiny, perfect bundle, oblivious. My chest tightened. This wasn't a bluff. "Maddie, please," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't do this." She stopped at the front door and finally looked at me. The coldness in her eyes struck me like a physical blow. All the warmth, all the love, all the history between us, it was gone. Erased. In its place was the cool, polite disinterest you give a stranger who'd held the door for you. "You were right," she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "I shouldn't have come here. It was a mistake to think this was a place for her. Or for me." She turned the doorknob. "You made your choice, Dad," she said, not looking back. "You chose who needed you more. Now live with it." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and a moment later I heard the engine of her beat-up Civic turn over. I watched through the window as her taillights disappeared down the street. The house was silent. Utterly, completely silent. Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs, a shadow in the dim hallway light. "Is Maddie gone?" he asked, his voice small. "Is she still mad at me?" I stared at the empty space by the door, where my granddaughter's car seat had been just moments before. I had won. I had protected my son. I had established the rules of my house. And in the crushing, deafening silence, I realized my victory felt exactly like losing everything.
Story 5.
The glass shattered when it hit the marble. Everyone looked at the mess. No one looked at me. "Sign it," my sister said again. Calm, venom wrapped in silk. "Or stop pretending you belong in this family." I laughed. It sounded wrong in my own ears. Belonging doesn't come with a price tag, Sana. That's when my mother slapped me. Not a nudge, not a warning. A full, open-handed crack that echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "You have no other choice," she hissed. "Do as you're told." The lawyer, a thin man with tired eyes, froze. Then he leaned toward her and whispered, "Do you know who actually owns this estate?" Silence fell like a curtain. That was the moment they realized the game wasn't over, it was only beginning. I still remember when we were a real family, before greed replaced blood. Sana used to follow me around like a shadow. I taught her how to ride a bike, how to cheat at cards, how to lie to our parents when she broke something. She called me her hero. Mother called me her investment. Father called me the son who would carry the name. It's funny. I carried everything. Their debts, their expectations, their secrets. When Father's real estate empire started collapsing, I was the one who saved it. I left my own career in London, liquidated my savings, cleaned up the mess quietly while they pretended nothing was wrong. They never thanked me. They just grew comfortable with my sacrifices. That's the problem with being the reliable one. You become invisible. The first crack wasn't the slap. It was the lies. I started noticing how Sana's tone changed whenever money came up. She'd ask about Father's properties, the new acquisitions, the insurance policies. She stopped asking how I was. One night, I found an email on Father's laptop. A draft deed, transferring the estate to Sana, dated 2 weeks after Father's death. Signed. My signature. Perfectly forged. That's when I understood. They had already decided I was expendable. They just needed my approval. Or my silence. Most people scream when they're betrayed. I took notes. I hired a private forensic analyst to verify the signature. He confirmed what I already knew, it wasn't mine. Then I found something even more interesting. The estate wasn't technically in Father's name. It was in a holding company. A company I created. Years ago, when Father needed someone to shield his assets from legal action. He never bothered to transfer ownership back. He just assumed it was his. And I never corrected him. Because I was still the loyal son back then. Because I still believed love was stronger than paper. I was wrong. Paper wins. I met with the lawyer privately. He was scared. That made him honest. Mother and Sana had pressured him to keep quiet, to fast-track the transfer, to convince me it was already done. He didn't know I owned the company. He didn't know the estate was untouchable without my authorization. He didn't know I had already rewritten the future. I didn't stop the transfer. I just redirected it. At the gathering, when the lawyer cleared his throat, everyone leaned forward. "Mrs. Rahman," he said, "the estate does not belong to your late husband. It belongs to the company." Mother's lips tightened. "Then the company signs it over. Simple." He turned his eyes toward me. "And the sole director and legal owner of that company is your son." Shock is an ugly emotion. It stretches faces, breaks composure, reveals the truth behind every smile. Sana looked like a stranger. Mother looked afraid. "Good. Sign it," Sana whispered now. But the arrogance was gone. "We can fix this. We're still family." "Family?" I said softly. "You tried to erase me." Mother stepped forward. "You wouldn't understand. I was protecting what your father built. No, I replied. You were protecting who you chose. Then I opened the envelope I'd brought. Inside were the real documents, not transferring the estate. Liquidating it. I had sold the property 3 days earlier, legally. Quietly. Irrevocably. The buyer was already moving in. And where is the money? Mother demanded, her voice cracking. I smiled. In the foundation I created, in Father's name. It will fund education and housing for families he displaced. Sana's face went pale. You gave it away? No, I said. I took it back. They called me selfish my whole life. That was the lie I finally corrected. I left them with nothing but their own reflection. No empire, no inheritance, no son. Just consequences. I walked out of that house the way I should have walked out years ago. Not broken, not angry. Free. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an investment. I felt like justice.
Story 6. Hello. My girlfriend laughed and said, "If my ex texted me right now, I'd drop you instantly." Everyone at the table laughed. I smiled too. Moments later, her phone buzzed. A public announcement of my promotion lighting up her screen. I stood up, left without a word, and let the silence do what no reply ever could. We were at a crowded rooftop bar downtown. The kind with overpriced cocktails and string lights meant to make everything feel lighter than it actually is. Her friends were there. A couple of her coworkers. People I'd spent months trying to fit in with. I was standing next to her, arm loosely around her waist, thinking the night was going fine. Then someone brought up her ex. Not in a serious way. Just one of those lazy, half-drunk, remember when comments. Her friend grinned and asked, "Be honest. If he texted you right now, what would you do?" She didn't even hesitate. "If my ex texted me right now," she said loudly, smiling, "I'd drop him instantly." She nodded toward me like I was a prop. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. That's the part that still bothers me. I smiled, raised my glass, played along like it was just a joke. Like my stomach hadn't just tightened. Like she hadn't reduced me to something disposable in front of a crowd. For context, I'm 32M. She's 29F. We'd been together 2 years. Lived together for 8 months. I paid most of the rent because she was figuring things out. I supported her career complaints, her late nights, her constant comparisons to people doing better than both of us. She loved to say she was just brutally honest. I'd learned that was her excuse for being cruel. Someone else joked, "Damn, savage," and she shrugged. What? I'm just saying. He knows where he stands. I nodded again, still smiling. Inside, something went quiet. That's when her phone buzzed. She glanced down, her smile flickering for half a second before she laughed again. "Oh wow," she said, holding up her screen. "Your company just posted about your promotion." People turned toward me, suddenly interested. "Wait, you got promoted?" someone asked. I hadn't even seen the post yet. She looked at me, amused. "Guess you're not as replaceable as I thought." More laughter. I didn't check my phone. I didn't say anything. I finished my drink, set the glass down carefully, and stepped away while everyone was distracted. I left without a word. Because sometimes silence doesn't argue. It concludes. I didn't go far that night. Just down the street, past the noise and the laughter, until the music faded into traffic and my phone finally felt heavy in my pocket. I checked the post then. There it was. My company's LinkedIn page. A photo from a conference months ago. My name. New title. A paragraph about leadership, trust, and long-term vision. Dozens of likes already. Comments from coworkers, mentors, even my boss. Congratulations. Well deserved. Proud of you. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because of the promotion. I'd known it was coming. But because of the timing. The irony felt deliberate, even though I knew it wasn't. I went home late. She was already there, sprawled on the couch, shoes kicked off, scrolling her phone. "Hey," she said without looking up. "Why'd you disappear?" "I left," I said. She smirked. "Don't be dramatic." Everyone was having fun. I didn't respond. I set my keys down, took off my jacket, and went to the kitchen. She followed a minute later, leaning against the counter with that look she got when she wanted to be entertained. "You okay?" she asked. Fake concern layered over irritation. "You got really quiet after the joke." "It wasn't a joke," I said. She laughed. "Oh my God, you're still on that? Relax. You know I didn't mean it like that." I looked at her. Really looked. The ease with which she dismissed it. The way she expected me to swallow it like I always did. "You said you'd drop me instantly," I replied. In front of everyone. She rolled her eyes. "People exaggerate. Besides, my ex would never text me." "Right," I said. She stepped closer. "And even if he did, it wouldn't mean anything. You're being insecure." There it was. The word she used every time I reacted to disrespect. She grabbed her phone, waved it in the air. "See? Nothing. Happy." I nodded. "Yeah." That seemed to satisfy her. She went back to the couch, already bored of the conversation. That night, lying in bed next to her, I replayed the laughter. The way no one questioned it. The way I'd smiled to make it easier for everyone else. I realized something then. She hadn't embarrassed me. She'd revealed herself. And once you see that clearly, you stop needing to explain why you're pulling away. You just do. The next few days felt strangely calm on the surface. She sent me the promotion post the morning after like it was hers to share. "Guess I'm dating a big shot now," faced with tears of joy. No congratulations. No pride. Just ownership. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and went back to work. That's when the comments started changing. "You're acting different," she said that night while we ate dinner. "Don't let this promotion go to your head." I kept my eyes on my plate. "It won't." She studied me like she was looking for something to poke at. "I just don't want you thinking you're suddenly above anyone." Above her, she meant. Later that week, we met up with the same group again. Different bar. Same energy. Her ex didn't come up this time, but she found other ways. She interrupted me mid-sentence to correct a detail that didn't matter. She joked about how corporate I sounded now. She told someone, "He's only good at work stuff." Emotionally, total mess. Everyone laughed again. I smiled again. But something had shifted. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was observing. On the way home, she sighed dramatically. "You were kind of boring tonight." I glanced over. "Yeah. You used to be more fun before you got all serious," she said. "Just don't forget, success doesn't make you interesting." That one stayed with me. Not because it hurt, because it explained everything. She needed me smaller so she could feel bigger. Needed me uncertain so she could feel chosen. And the moment something external validated me, something she couldn't control, she started cutting. That night, while she slept, I opened a notes app and started writing. Not feelings. Facts. What I paid. What I covered. What I postponed for us. I also wrote down a date 6 months in the future. Not a deadline. A checkpoint. She still thought the joke was harmless. She had no idea she'd already lost the audience that mattered most. By the second week after the bar, she started pushing harder. It was subtle at first. Little comments meant to test whether I'd shrink back into place. "Must be nice getting all this attention at work," she said one morning while getting ready. "Just don't start thinking you're special." I didn't answer. That bothered her. She was used to reactions, defensiveness, reassurance. Arguments she could win. Silence confused her. So she escalated. One night, while we were watching TV, she casually said, "You know, my ex would have handled that promotion way better than you." I muted the TV. Looked at her. "How so?" I asked. "He just had more presence," she said, smirking. "More confidence. Not this quiet, brooding thing you're doing lately." There it was again. Comparison as correction. I nodded slowly. "Sounds like you really admire him." She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I'm just saying." She always just said things. Never owned the impact. Never apologized. The cruelty was always framed as honesty. And honesty was always framed as a favor. A few days later, she asked if I could cover a larger share of rent again because she was between opportunities. I agreed without discussion. Not because I felt obligated, but because I was already planning my exit. And keeping the peace bought me time. That night, she posted another story. A photo of her drink. Caption: "Still waiting for someone who actually excites me." I saw it. She knew I would. She didn't look at me once when she came to bed. Lying there in the dark, I realized something important. She wasn't trying to leave me. She was trying to scare me into staying smaller. People like that don't want to end relationships. They want leverage. They want you unsure, grateful, replaceable. The promotion post hadn't impressed her. It had threatened her. And from that moment on, everything she did was about restoring the old balance, where I laughed off disrespect and called it love. What she didn't know was that balance was already gone. I wasn't angry. I was preparing. And preparation is far more dangerous than rage. The night everything finally tipped wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No tears. Just a quiet realization that I'd crossed some invisible line she couldn't pull me back from. We were at dinner with another couple, friends of hers I barely tolerated. Midway through the meal, the guy asked how work was going. Before I could answer, she cut in. "He's been so full of himself lately," she said, laughing. "Ever since that promotion post. Like, relax, you're still you." Everyone chuckled. I smiled again. Out of habit. Out of muscle memory. Then she added, "Honestly, if my ex texted me right now, I'd still drop everything. At least he knew how to keep things exciting." That one landed differently this time. Not because it was worse, but because I didn't feel the need to recover from it. I excused myself to the bathroom, stood there staring at my reflection, and felt something settle. No anger. No humiliation. Just certainty. When I came back, she was already scrolling her phone under the table. It buzzed. She glanced down and froze for half a second. Then she laughed loudly. "Oh my God. Speak of the devil. Your company reposted the promotion again. Guess you're really milking this." She turned the screen toward the table. Everyone leaned in, suddenly impressed. "Damn," someone said. "That's huge." She looked at me, smirking. "See? Guess I picked someone right after all." That was the moment. I stood up, calmly, placed my napkin on the table, and said nothing. She frowned. "Where are you going?" "I'm heading out," I said. "Seriously?" she scoffed. "Over a joke?" I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I walked out into the night air feeling lighter than I had in months, knowing something she didn't yet understand. I'd already outgrown the version of myself she still thought she controlled. And silence, real silence, was about to teach her a lesson no argument ever could. She didn't text me that night. That's how I knew it bothered her. Normally, if I walked out or went quiet, my phone would blow up with messages. Half accusatory, half needy. That night, nothing. Just silence. Strategic silence. The kind meant to punish. I let it work. The next morning, she finally messaged me like nothing had happened. "You left your charger here. Also, don't be weird about last night." No apology. No question. Just an expectation that I'd fall back into place. I replied, "Keep it." That was new. When I got home that evening, she was already annoyed. Sitting on the couch, arms crossed, TV on mute. "So we're doing the passive-aggressive thing now?" she asked. "No," I said, setting my keys down. "We're doing the honest thing." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You walked out to make a point." "I walked out because I was done being the punchline." She laughed, sharp and dismissive. "God, you're so dramatic lately. You really think you're irreplaceable now?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. That unsettled her more than anything. "You know," she continued, leaning forward, "confidence looks bad on you. You should be grateful I put up with your moods." That was it. The line she crossed without realizing there was no return from it. I am grateful. I said calmly. Just not for you. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. Over the next few weeks, I pulled back in ways she couldn't accuse me of directly. I stopped covering her extras, stopped adjusting my schedule, stopped explaining where I was or why I was late. I worked relentlessly. Early mornings, late nights, weekends. I poured everything into building something solid, something that didn't rely on her approval or tolerance. She complained constantly. You're never around. You don't care anymore. You're acting single. She wasn't wrong. What she didn't know was that every quiet hour I spent working was moving me further away from her reach. She thought I was sulking. I was positioning myself. And by the time she realized the difference, it was already too late. The first crack showed when she realized silence wasn't pulling me back. It had been almost 3 weeks since I walked out of that dinner. 3 weeks of me coming home late, leaving early, and answering her questions with fewer and fewer words. I wasn't cold. I was neutral. And that drove her insane. You don't even fight anymore, she snapped one night while I was putting on my jacket. Do you even care if I leave? I paused, genuinely thinking about it. I care, I said. I just don't panic. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She started trying a different angle after that. Suddenly, she was affectionate. Compliments she'd never given before. Touches that felt rehearsed. You've been doing really well lately, she said one evening, tracing her finger along my arm. I knew you had it in you. I smiled politely. Funny, I replied. I don't remember you saying that before. Her face tightened for half a second before she recovered. I was just trying to push you. Push. Right. A few days later, she tested me again. You know, she said casually while scrolling her phone. My ex liked one of my old photos today. I didn't react. She waited. Looked up. Aren't you going to ask about it? No, I said. Why would I? That scared her. For the first time, I saw uncertainty replace arrogance. Because indifference can't be negotiated with. You can't guilt it. You can't provoke it. You can't shame it. That night, while she slept, I packed a small bag and left it in my trunk. Not to leave yet. Just to be ready. The next morning, my company announced another internal post. New project lead. Bigger scope. Bigger visibility. My phone buzzed nonstop. Hers didn't. She saw it anyway. She always did. When I got home, she was sitting at the table, unusually quiet. So, she said finally, guess things are really happening for you. Yeah, I replied. They are. She nodded slowly, then said the one thing she didn't realize was already too late. Just don't forget who was there before all this. I looked at her and thought, I haven't forgotten. That's exactly why I was leaving. I didn't leave that night. Not because I hesitated, but because timing matters when you're dealing with someone who needs control. I wanted the absence to land clean, not feel like a reaction. Over the next month, I became a ghost in my own apartment. I stopped sharing my schedule, stopped updating her on work, stopped reacting when she baited me. She noticed everything. "You're hiding things," she accused one morning. "People don't just change like this." "They do," I said, "when they're done explaining themselves." That answer rattled her. She started spiraling in smaller, messier ways. Picking fights over dishes. Over tone. Over nothing. Then switching to affection the moment it didn't work. One night, she snapped completely. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" she said. Eyes sharp. "Ever since that promotion post?" "No," I replied. "I think I finally stopped believing I was worse." She went silent. A few days later, I signed the lease on a new place. Quiet building. Closer to work. No drama. No history. I moved my important things first: documents, clothes, laptop. I left the rest for later. The night before I officially moved out, she tried one last time. "You know," she said, lying next to me in bed, "people don't just walk away from something real." I stared at the ceiling. "They walk away from disrespect all the time." She didn't reply. The next morning, I left early. No note. No announcement. Just my keys on the counter and my life already in motion. She called later that day. I didn't answer. Because some lessons don't need closure. They need space. And silence was about to do what no argument ever could. She didn't handle the silence well. 3 days after I moved out, my phone started lighting up. First texts. Then calls. Then calls from numbers I didn't recognize. "Where are you?" "This is childish. You don't get to disappear like this." I didn't respond. A week later, she changed tactics. "I'm worried about you. We should talk like adults. I miss us." That one almost sounded convincing. If you ignored the months of disrespect that came before it. I heard from mutual friends that she was spiraling. Telling people I'd changed. That I'd let success go to my head. That I abandoned her right when things got good. She left out the jokes. The comparisons. The night she laughed about dropping me for her ex. Funny how selective memory gets when consequences show up. Then came the call I didn't expect. She called from her work phone. I answered out of curiosity. She was crying immediately. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she said between sobs. "You didn't even fight." "I did fight," I replied calmly. "Just not for you." That made her angry fast. "So what? You think you're better than me now?" she snapped. "You think this promotion makes you untouchable?" "No," I said. "I think it showed me what I was tolerating." She went quiet. Then her voice softened again. "If my ex texted me now, I wouldn't answer. I swear." I almost laughed. "That wasn't the problem," I said. "The problem was you wanted me to hear it." She begged then. Actually begged. Promised she'd change. Said she was joking. Said everyone jokes like that. I looked out the window of my new place at the city lights. Quiet. Steady, peaceful. "I believe you could change," I said honestly. I just don't need to stay to see it. She hung up without saying goodbye. That was the last time we spoke. Because by then, the silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was protection. I saw her one last time about 2 months later. It wasn't planned. It never is. I was at a small industry mixer. Nothing flashy, just drinks, quiet conversations, people talking shop. I was there with someone new. Not as a statement. Not to prove anything. Just because life had kept moving and I'd let it. She spotted me across the room. I knew immediately by the way her posture stiffened. She walked over slowly, eyes flicking between me and the woman beside me. My new girlfriend smiled politely, completely unbothered. That alone said more than any words could have. So, my ex said, forcing a laugh, "Guess everything worked out for you." "Yeah," I replied. "It did." She nodded, swallowing. "I didn't think you'd actually leave like that." Without saying anything, I thought about the bar. The laughter. The way she'd made me the punchline and expected me to play along. I said everything I needed to, I said. Just not out loud. She looked down. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback ready. No joke. No comparison. No weaponized honesty. I didn't think silence would hurt more than yelling, she admitted quietly. I met her eyes. It usually does. There was a long pause before she asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you ever miss me?" I answered honestly. I miss who I was before I learned better. That was the end of it. She nodded once, stepped back, and walked away without another word. I turned back to my girlfriend, who squeezed my hand and asked if I was okay. I was. Because some people only understand your value when you stop explaining it to them. And sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger, or revenge, or closure. It's building a life so full and steady that the person who tried to make you feel replaceable can only watch it happen. From the outside. In silence. Bye-bye. Story 7.
The text from Maya came on a Tuesday. Massive news engagement party this Saturday, my place. It's a costume party. Be there. A costume party. Perfect. That's my language. I've known Maya since we were kids, building pillow forts, and now at 19 I was building elaborate cosplays in my garage. She was the one person who got it. She'd sit on a stool for hours, handing me tools and offering opinions on foam armor, while she told me about her life. Lately, it was all about David. David, her fiancé. The guy who always seemed a little too polished. He smiled at all the right times, but it never quite reached his eyes. "What's the theme?" I texted back. "No theme, go nuts," she replied. No theme is a trap. It's a test. You can't just show up as a generic pirate. You have to be clever. And for my best friend's engagement party, clever was the bare minimum. I spent a solid hour brainstorming before it hit me. An engagement party, a wedding adjacent theme, something iconic and a little dramatic. The Corpse Bride. It was perfect. A little gothic, a little funny, and a technical challenge. I already had a base wedding dress from a thrift store haul that I'd been saving for something special. For the next 4 days, I lived in my garage. I shredded the hem of the dress, stained it with tea and gray acrylic paint to look like it had been buried for a century. I molded a rib cage out of foam clay and stitched it into a gaping hole in the side. The veil was the easy part. The makeup was the hardest. It took 3 practice runs to get the exact shade of melancholy blue and the perfect doll-like eyes. By Saturday night, I looked incredible. The dress was a tragic masterpiece, the skeletal arm I'd fashioned looked unnervingly real, and the blue makeup was flawless. I was a walking, talking Tim Burton creation. I couldn't wait for Maya to see it. I got to her house and it was already packed. The place looked amazing, way fancier than I expected, with fairy lights strung up everywhere and people in cocktail dresses mingling with guys in superhero costumes. It was an eclectic mix. I spotted a guy dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow talking to a woman in a sleek black dress, who was clearly not in costume. The no-theme thing really threw people. David saw me first. He was standing near the door, holding a glass of champagne, looking sharp in a tailored suit. His eyes scanned my costume from head to toe. A slow, tight smile spread across his face. "Wow, Grant," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "You really went all out." You know me, I laughed. Go big or go home. Where's Maya? I want to see her reaction. She's in the garden, making the rounds. Grab a drink? She'll find you. I did just that. For the next hour, I was a hit. People loved the costume. They wanted pictures, they asked how I made the arm, they complimented the makeup. I felt great. I found Maya in the garden, and she shrieked with delight when she saw me. "Grant! Oh my God, you look amazing," she yelled, pulling me into a hug, careful not to smudge my makeup. She was glowing, wearing a simple but beautiful white dress that wasn't a costume at all. "You said go nuts, so I went nuts," I said, spinning to show off the tattered train. "It's perfect. You're insane." "I love it." We chatted for a bit, catching up before she was pulled away by another guest. I settled into the party feeling completely at ease. This was exactly where I was supposed to be celebrating my best friend in the most me way possible. About an hour later, David clinked a champagne flute with a knife. The crowd quieted down, gathering in the living room. Maya joined him at the front, her hand in his. They looked like a magazine cover. "Thank you all so much for coming," David started, his arm wrapped around Maya's waist. "It means the world to us that you're all here to celebrate with us." Maya beamed. "We're so grateful to have you all in our lives, which is why we wanted you to be here for the Times Real Times event." She paused for dramatic effect, looking at David. He took a deep breath, his smile widening. "This isn't an engagement party." A confused murmur rippled through the room. I leaned against a wall, intrigued. "Surprise," they shouted in unison. "It's our wedding. The officiant will be here in 20 minutes. The room exploded. People were cheering, screaming, clapping. My stomach dropped through the floor. The champagne flute in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked down at my tattered, stained wedding dress, at my blue skin, at my exposed foam clay ribs. This isn't a costume party. This is a wedding. And I'm in a wedding dress. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through my veins. My clever, relevant costume had just become a monstrous, attention-grabbing insult. I had to fix this. Now, I pushed through the celebrating crowd, my eyes locked on David. Maya was already swarmed by her family crying happy tears. David was my only option. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the kitchen. "David," I whispered, my voice tight. "Oh my God. I had no idea. I am so sorry." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Sorry for what? It's a party. I'm wearing a wedding dress to your wedding. I have to go change. I live 10 minutes away. I can be back in a real suit before the ceremony even starts. No one will even notice I was gone. I was already planning my escape route. I could sprint home, shower off the blue paint, throw on the one good suit I owned, and make it back just in time. It was possible. It was necessary." David put a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. He looked me right in the eye. "Don't," he said. I blinked. "What?" "Don't go," he repeated, his voice calm and steady. "Seriously, man, it's fine." It's hilarious. We told people it was a costume party. You came in a costume. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. I can't stand up at your wedding dressed like the corpse bride. Why not? He actually chuckled. Maya thought it was great. She'd be more upset if you just left her wedding. Just stay. Enjoy yourself. We want you here just like this. He was the groom. He was telling me explicitly that it was okay. That he and Maya wanted me to stay. My frantic energy deflated, replaced by a wave of awkward relief. I was still mortified, but if the groom himself was telling me not to worry, I had to trust him. Are you absolutely sure? I asked one last time. 100%, he said, patting my shoulder. Now go get another drink. You look like you've seen a ghost. He winked and walked back to his guests. So I stayed. I sat through the ceremony in the back row trying to shrink into myself. I felt every single stare from Maya's great aunts. During the reception, I hovered by the bar, avoiding the dance floor and the wedding photographer like they were the plague. I did what David said. I stayed. I tried to enjoy myself. I watched Maya have the happiest night of her life, and I pushed down the crippling feeling that I was a walking, breathing joke, tainting her perfect day. When it was time to leave, I found Maya and gave her a huge, careful hug. Congratulations, May. I'm so happy for you. Thank you for being here, Grant, she said, her eyes shining. She seemed a million miles away, lost in her own happiness, and didn't mention the dress once. I gave David a nod. Congrats, man. He clapped me on the back. Thanks for staying, he said with that same tight smile. Drive safe. I drove home the steering wheel, cool against my blue-painted hands. I felt exhausted, embarrassed, but mostly just glad it was over. I dodged a bullet. David had saved me. In my apartment, I peeled off the skeletal glove and tossed it on my chair. I just wanted to get the makeup off and forget this whole night ever happened. My phone, which had been on silent, was sitting on the counter. As I walked past, the screen lit up. Then it lit up again. And again. A rapid-fire succession of buzzes vibrated across the granite. I picked it up. 3 new messages, all from Maya. The preview on the lock screen was short, sharp, and hit me like a punch to the gut. What the hell is wrong with you? My fingers fumbled as I unlocked the phone, the blue makeup smearing a faint streak across the screen. Her full messages loaded in a sickening cascade. Maya times, what the hell is wrong with you, asterisk? Maya times, to wear a wedding dress to my wedding. Are you that desperate for attention, asterisk? Maya times, you couldn't let me have one day. One day that wasn't about you and your stupid costumes. You've humiliated me. You've humiliated David. Asterisk. The words blurred. It felt like a physical blow. I immediately hit her contact and called. It rang once before going to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. My heart hammered against my ribs, the ones made of foam clay I'd so carefully crafted. I typed a reply, my hands shaking so badly I had to delete and restart 3 times. Me times, Maya, what are you talking about? I offered to leave, I begged David to let me go home and change. He told me to stay. He said it was fine, asterisk. The 3 little dots appeared instantly, then vanished. A new message popped up, not from her, but from David. David times, hey man. Maya's really upset. You need to apologize. Asterisk. I stared at his text, a cold dread washing over me. This was a nightmare. I forwarded him a screenshot of my last text to Maya. Me times, apologize for what? For listening to you. You need to tell her what happened. Tell her you told me to stay. Asterisk. David times, whoa, hold on. I was trying to be nice. I didn't think you'd actually stick around for the ceremony looking like that. You put me in an impossible spot. I couldn't exactly kick my wife's best friend out of our wedding. Asterisk. The gaslighting was so blatant, so absolute, it stole my breath. He was twisting his explicit instructions into a vague gesture of politeness. He was painting me as the socially inept weirdo who couldn't take a hint. Me times, that is a lie. You were specific. You said, don't go. You said it was hilarious and that Maya would be more upset if I left. You know you did. Asterisk. David Times, look, you made a scene, I tried to manage it, and now my wife is crying on our wedding night? This is on you, Grant. You caused this. You owe her an apology. We need you to just leave us alone right now. Asterisk. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard full of furious, useless words. What could I even say? He had his story, and he was sticking to it. Before I could type another letter, a final message came through from Maya. Maya, times David. Just told me everything. How you refused to leave when he asked you to. I can't believe you would lie to me like this. On top of everything else, I'm done. Lose my number. Asterisk. I tried to reply a frantic jumble of, he's lying to you, but the message failed to send. A small red exclamation point appeared next to it. Message failed to deliver. I went to her profile. Blocked. I switched to David's. Blocked. Just like that, I was gone. Cut out. Erased. I sank onto my couch, still in the dress, the cheap lace, scratching my skin. The blue makeup felt like a mask of shame I couldn't take off. My best friend since kindergarten, the girl who knew every secret I had, thought I was a monster. And her new husband, the man I had trusted, had orchestrated the whole thing. The next few days were a gray, silent blur. I scrubbed the blue paint from my skin until it was raw. I took the corpse bride dress, the skeletal arm, the veil, all of it, and shoved it into a black trash bag in the back of my closet. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification from someone else, my stomach lurched with the false hope that it was her. It never was. The silence from her was louder than any argument we'd ever had. On Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, but the text was unmistakable. It's Maya. Can we talk? I called the number instantly. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was flat, hollowed out. Hi. Maya, I breathed a mix of relief and anger swirling in my gut. Are you okay? What happened? I'm not home, she said, her voice cracking. I'm at my sister's place. Why? What's going on? There was a long pause, then a shaky sigh. Because you were right, Grant. You were telling the truth. I weighted my knuckles white on the phone. For 2 days, she began, I believed him. I was so angry, so hurt. I couldn't understand how you could be so cruel. David told me he'd pulled you aside and quietly asked you to change, and that you'd laughed it off, saying the invitation said go nuts, and that you weren't leaving. He made you sound so arrogant. My throat tightened. That's not what happened. I know, she whispered. But something felt off. The way he told the story was too perfect. Too practiced. So yesterday, I called my cousin Sarah. She was standing by the kitchen when you two were talking. She heard everything. My mind flashed back to the party. I remembered seeing people milling around, but I was in too much of a panic to notice who. Sarah said she heard you pleading with him, Maya continued, her voice gaining a sharp edge of anger. She heard you say you lived 10 minutes away and could be back in a suit. And she heard David, clear as day, tell you, don't go. It's fine. We want you here just like this. The validation was a hollow victory. It didn't fix the agony of the past few days. I confronted him with it last night, she said. He tried to deny it, said Sarah. Must have misheard. But then I told him I'd also spoken to Mark, the guy in the pirate costume, who saw the whole exchange. That's when David... He broke. She took a shaky breath. He admitted everything, Grant. Everything. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan. He's been jealous of us for 5 years. He told me he hates how you and I have a history he can't be a part of. He hates that I tell you things I don't tell him. He thought if he could just make you look like a selfish asshole, I would finally cut you out of my life for good. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The no-theme party. The way his eyes raked over my costume. His smooth, easy dismissal of my panic. The perfectly constructed lie. It was a 5-year-long resentment culminating in a single devastating act of sabotage. He saw your costume, Maya choked out a sob, finally breaking through, and he knew he'd hit the jackpot. It was the perfect trap. And I walked right into it. Maya, I'm so sorry, I said, but the words felt stupid and small. It's not your fault, she said fiercely. It's his. I married a man who built our wedding day on a lie designed to destroy my oldest friendship. I looked at him last night and I didn't recognize him. The trust is... It's not just broken, Grant. It's gone. It was never even there. We sat in silence for a moment, the chasm David had created stretching between our two phones. He hadn't just tried to ruin a friendship. He'd poisoned his own marriage from the very first minute. He got what he wanted, a fight that might end our friendship, but the fallout had incinerated his entire world. What are you going to do? I asked quietly. I don't know, she said, her voice weary. I just know I can't go home. Not now. Maybe not ever.
Story 8.
For 11 years, my life was a grayscale photograph. After my wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer, the color just drained out of everything. I went to work, I paid the bills, I raised my kids, Tom and Jane, I existed. At 54, I figured that was my lot. I'd had my great love, and now my job was to just see things through. Then I met Lacey. It was at a charity auction of all places. She was volunteering, running around with a clipboard and a smile that could power a small city. We talked for 5 minutes, and it was like someone turned the lights back on. She was funny, sharp, and had this warmth that made you feel like you'd known her for years. For the first time since Sarah, I felt alive. Bringing her home to meet the kids was the real test. Tom, my son, is 27. He lives an hour away, but he drove in just for it. He shook Lacey's hand, saw the way I looked at her, and pulled me aside while she was in the bathroom. Dad, he said, clapping me on the shoulder, it's about damn time. I'm happy for you. I could have cried with relief. Then, there was Jane. Jane is 24, still in grad school, and she was always her mother's shadow. They were inseparable. The 11 years since Sarah's death hadn't been a healing period for her. It was a wound she kept picking at. When Lacey held out her hand, Jane just looked at it. Jane, I prompted, my voice tight. She finally gave Lacey a limp, two-fingered shake. A pleasure, she said, with the same enthusiasm you'd use for a root canal. That first dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Lacey, bless her heart, tried everything. She asked Jane about her art history program. It's fine, Jane said, stabbing at a green bean. Oh? What period are you focusing on? Lacey pressed, still smiling. The Renaissance. How fascinating. I've always been drawn to Caravaggio. The drama in his work is just incredible. Jane looked up from her plate, her eyes like chips of ice. Mom preferred Michelangelo. She felt he had more soul. The rest of the meal went like that. Every time Lacey said something, Jane would find a way to bring up her mother, drawing a line in the sand so clear it might as well have been a brick wall. It only got worse. A few weeks later, we all went out for my birthday. Lacey gave me a beautiful, sleek silver watch. I loved it. I was taking my old one off when Jane spoke up, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Oh, retiring that old thing?" she asked, nodding at the leather-banded watch in my hand. "The one Mom gave you for your 40th? I froze. "I'm not retiring it, Janie. I'll wear both." "Of course," she said, turning her gaze to Lacey. "That's a very generous gift. Must have cost a fortune." Lacey's smile faltered. "Joshua deserves something special." "He certainly does," Jane said, and took a long, pointed sip of her wine. The implication hung in the air times, and you're not it, asterisk. I tried talking to her alone. I'd call her, invite her for coffee. "Jane, you have to give her a chance. She makes me happy." "Does she?" she'd reply, her voice flat. "Or does she just like that you have a nice house and a healthy retirement account?" That's unfair, and you know it. Is it, she's a 5-year-old yoga instructor. You're a 4-year-old executive. It's a classic story, Dad. Every conversation was a dead end. Every family get-together became a minefield. Tom saw it too. He tried to run interference, drawing Jane into conversations on the other side of the room, but she was relentless. A stray comment here, a withering glare there. She was making my life, and more importantly Lacey's, a living hell. The breaking point came at my mother's 82nd birthday party. I told Jane that Lacey was coming. The 30 seconds of dead silence on the phone should have been my warning. The party was at my brother's house, a big loud affair with 24 relatives, a mountain of food, and a backyard full of screaming grandkids. Lacey was a champ. She mingled, she charmed my aunts, she even helped my sister-in-law carry out the cake. I watched her from across the room, my heart swelling. This was it. This was the life I wanted back. Jane arrived late wearing a black dress that seemed more appropriate for a funeral. She ignored Lacey completely, giving her a look that could curdle milk as she walked past to hug her grandmother. For the next hour, I could feel Jane's eyes on us every time Lacey and I laughed every time I put my arm around her. Then my Uncle Frank cornered me by the grill to tell me a long, rambling story about his new fishing boat. It took 20 minutes to make my escape. By the time I turned around, Lacey was gone. I scanned the living room, the kitchen, the patio. Nothing. I found her in the driveway, standing by my car, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face was pale and her eyes were glistening. "Lace. What's wrong? Are you okay?" She just shook her head, not looking at me. "Can we just go, Joshua? Please." "Go." "What happened?" "Nothing. I have a headache. I want to go home." I knew she was lying. I looked back at the house and saw Jane standing in the doorway watching us with a look of cold, grim satisfaction on her face. My blood went hot. "It was Jane, wasn't it?" I said, my voice low. "What did she say to you?" Lacey finally looked at me and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't," I said, my jaw clenched. I started walking toward the house. Lacey grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, Joshua, don't. Please. Don't make a scene. It's your mother's birthday. Just take me home." I looked from Lacey's pleading, tear-streaked face to my daughter's triumphant smirk in the doorway. The anger in my chest felt like a physical weight. I took a deep breath, nodded, and led Lacey to the passenger side. The drive home was silent and suffocating. When we pulled into my garage, I killed the engine and turned to her. "Tell me what she said." Lacey stared out the windshield. "She found me when I was getting a glass of water. She told me to stop pretending, that she sees right through me." Her voice started to shake. "She said I was a parasite latching onto you because you were a lonely old man with a full wallet. She said I was trying to erase her mother and that she would never ever let that happen. She finally broke, burying her face in her hands. She said she wished you had just stayed alone, that it would be better than being with someone like me. I sat there, the engine ticking as it cooled, a furious, white-hot rage building inside me. This wasn't grief anymore. This was cruelty. This was a calculated attack on a woman I loved, a woman who had done nothing but show my daughter kindness. I had let it go on for too long. I had made excuses. I had hoped it would get better. I was done hoping. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I drove across town. I parked in front of the apartment complex I paid for, walked up to the second floor, and knocked on Unit 2B. A moment later, the door swung open. Jane stood there in her pajamas, a coffee mug in her hand, a flicker of surprise in her eyes that quickly hardened into defiance. "Jane," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "we need to talk." "Now." She stepped back, letting me pass without a word. The apartment was neat, filled with art books and half-finished canvases leaning against the walls. It was a space I'd helped her secure, a place I paid for so she could focus on her studies without worrying about rent. The irony was a bitter pill in the back of my throat. She closed the door and leaned against it, crossing her arms. "What?" "Don't play dumb, Jane. You know what." "What you said to Lacey yesterday." A small, humorless smile touched her lips. I just told her the truth. Someone had to. The sheer audacity of it sent a fresh wave of anger through me. The truth. You ambushed a guest at your grandmother's birthday party and called her a parasite. You made her cry. You call that the truth? "I call it protecting my family," she shot back, her voice rising. "She's not one of us. She's a replacement. You look at her and you're trying so hard to see Mom, and it's pathetic." "This has nothing to do with your mother," I said, my voice dangerously low. "It has everything to do with her." Jane's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "You think you can just slot someone else into her life, into her home, into her family? 11 years, Dad. That's all it took for you to decide her memory wasn't enough for you anymore." Every word was a twisting knife. "Your mother is gone, Jane. I loved her more than my own life, and I will miss her every single day until I die. But I am not dead. I am allowed to be happy. And you have no right, none, to sabotage that." "Happy?" she laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're not happy, you're just lonely. And she saw you coming from a mile away. A sad, rich widower. The perfect mark. Do you really think she loves you, or does she love the security, the trips, the nice dinners, the fact that she doesn't have to worry about money for the rest of her life?" That was it. That was the line. All the patience, all the understanding I had tried to hold on to it, all evaporated. "You'd rather I just withered away, wouldn't you?" I asked, stepping toward her. "You'd rather I just sat alone in that big house for the next 30 years, miserable, just to prove how much I loved your mother." Her eyes blazed with a tearful, righteous fury. "Yes, I would. That would be better than watching you make a fool of yourself with some woman who's only after your money." I stopped a foot from her, the silence in the room crackling. I'd come here to reason with her, to make her see the pain she was causing. But I saw now that she didn't care about the pain. She was wielding it like a weapon. "Okay," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "I'm done. I am done with the insults, the glares, the cruelty. I am done letting you hurt a good woman who has done nothing but try to be kind to you." I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She expected me to yell, to argue. She didn't expect this cold finality. "Here's how this is going to work," I continued, my voice steady. "You will treat Lacey with basic human civility. You don't have to like her. You don't have to be her best friend. But you will stop the snide comments. You will stop the accusations. You will be polite. If you see her, you will say hello. You will treat her with the same basic respect you would show a stranger on the street." Jane stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. "You can't be serious." I'm deadly serious. You will do that, or this all stops. I gestured around the apartment. The rent? The tuition for your master's program? The monthly allowance I put in your bank account? It all ends. Immediately. Her face went from defiant to aghast. You would cut me off for times her asterisk. No, I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I would cut you off for you. For the hateful, cruel person you've become. You are using your mother's memory as an excuse to be a bully, and it's over. The choice is yours, Jane. Civility or self-sufficiency. For a moment, she looked like she might shatter. I saw the little girl I used to push on the swings, the teenager I taught to drive. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of pure contempt. You're an idiot, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. She's already turned you against your own daughter. I hope you're happy. She yanked the door open. Get out. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out, the slam of the door behind me echoing the one that had just closed in my heart. The drive home was a blur. I sat in my quiet house, the silence, a heavy blanket. The watch Lacey gave me felt heavy on my wrist. I felt sick. I had just leveraged my love for my daughter against her financial survival. What kind of father does that? My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Tom. I knew it would be. I let it ring 4 times before finally answering. Dad, his voice was tight with concern. I just talked to Jane. Then you know, I said, my voice weary. She's a wreck. She said you're cutting her off. I gave her a choice, Tom. A choice, Dad. That wasn't a choice. That was an ultimatum. You can't hold her education over her head like that. It's not fair. You know what's not fair? I snapped, my composure finally cracking. It's not fair what she did to Lacey. It's not fair that I have to watch the woman I love get torn apart by my own daughter. She cornered her, Tom. She called her a gold-digging parasite. When does it stop? There was a pause on the line. I know she went too far, he said, his voice softer now. I'm not defending what she said. But Dad, you have to understand where she's coming from. It's been you and us for 11 years. For almost her entire adult life. Seeing you with someone else, it's like she's losing Mom all over again. She just needs more time. How much more time, Tom? I asked, rubbing my tired eyes. Another year, another decade. Am I supposed to put my life on hold indefinitely? While she refuses to process her grief? Lacey doesn't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I know. But threatening her financially, that's a hell of a way to handle it. You just poured gasoline on the fire. He was right. I knew he was right. I had escalated things to a point of no return. But sitting there listening to the echo of Jane's insults and picturing Lacey's tear-streaked face, I couldn't see another way. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation went nowhere. He thought I was being a tyrant. I thought he was enabling Jane's toxic behavior. After we hung up, I just sat there staring at a framed photo on the mantel. It was of Sarah Jane and Tom taken on a beach vacation a year before she got sick. They were all smiling, happy. A lifetime ago. I did it to protect Lacey. I did it to force a change. But as the doubt began to creep in, cold and sharp, I had to ask myself the question that was now screaming in my head. By using my money as a weapon to demand respect from my new partner, did I just become the asshole?
Story 9.
I should have seen the first red flag for what it was, a giant waving blood-red banner signaling a Category 5 hurricane named Brenda. But I was 20, in love with her son Mark, and hopelessly optimistic. Mark was in the military stationed 1,000 miles from my Kansas home, and our relationship was a whirlwind of letters and late-night calls. The first banner waved on Facebook. I posted a playful comment on Mark's wall after he'd stolen my favorite hoodie during a visit. "You're lucky. I love you, you thief. I'm going to get you back for that." A string of laughing emojis followed. Benign. Cute, even. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice tight with a tension I'd never heard before. "Sky, what did you post on my Facebook?" "What? Just that silly thing about the hoodie." "Why?" A heavy sigh crackled through the phone. "My mom just called my commanding officer's office. She reported that you were making threats against me online and that they needed to be aware of your unstable nature." I was silent. Not because I didn't have words, but because my brain couldn't form a single one. He continued, "My first sergeant pulled me aside. I had to explain that my fiancée wasn't planning a hit on me over a sweatshirt. That was Brenda. Before I'd even met her in person, she was trying to torpedo my life and his career over a joke. Mark brushed it off as her being overprotective. I, like an idiot, accepted that. Our first in-person meeting was a trial by fire. She sized me up from the doorway of her immaculate suburban home, her eyes scanning my simple jeans and t-shirt with unconcealed disdain. Later, while Mark was out of the room, she cornered me in the kitchen. "So you're the one," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mark tells me you're from Kansas." "I am," I said with a smile, trying to find common ground. Her own smile vanished. "Let me give you some advice. My son is destined for great things. He doesn't need some little piece of Kansas trash dragging him down." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, stunned, while she just turned back to chopping her vegetables as if she'd just commented on the weather. When Mark came back in, I couldn't speak. He saw the look on my face and asked what was wrong. Brenda answered for me. "Oh, we were just having a lovely girl-to-girl chat." "Weren't we, Skylar?" Her control bled into every corner of our lives. When my parents, bless their hearts, offered to buy us a washer and dryer as a wedding gift, we were ecstatic. We were young, broke, and the idea of not having to haul laundry to a laundromat felt like winning the lottery. We made the mistake of sharing our good news with Brenda. "Absolutely not," she snapped over the phone. Mark had her on speaker. "You will not accept that. It's a handout. My son does not take charity, especially not from times them, asterisk." "Mom, it's a gift," Mark argued, his voice already losing its edge. "It's a power play, Mark. They're trying to make you feel like you can't provide for her. You tell them no." We fought about it for a week. We took the washer and dryer, and for the next year, Brenda would find a way to mention it in every conversation, a constant reminder that I had forced her son to accept a handout because he couldn't stand up to me. But the tax refund, that was the moment I realized this wasn't just overprotectiveness. This was war. We filed our first taxes as a married couple, and we're getting back a few $1,000s. It was a fortune to us. We planned to pay off my clunker of a car. The day the refund hit our joint account, I was thrilled. A few hours later, I logged in to pay a bill and my stomach dropped. The balance was zero. The entire refund was gone. A single transfer. To B. Miller. Brenda. I called Mark, my voice shaking. She took it. She took all of it. He didn't believe me at first. Then he checked. The phone call that followed was epic. I could hear her screeching through the receiver. "I was just holding it for you," she yelled. "You two are children. You would have wasted it on something frivolous. I know what's best." It took threats of legal action from my dad before she wired the money back. The very next day, we walked into the bank, closed that account she'd been on since Mark was 16, and opened a new one at a completely different bank. The boundary was set. A line drawn in concrete. To Brenda, it was a declaration of war. I had stolen her son and cut her out of his finances. I was the villain, the conniving little gold digger who had turned her perfect boy against her. Then came the kids. Our firstborn, a beautiful baby girl, was a new pawn in her game. Brenda, an ex-nurse who now considered herself a holistic wellness guru, launched her campaign before the pregnancy test was even dry. The phone calls were relentless. "You can't vaccinate my grandbaby, Mark. It's poison." Skylar, with her so-called medical training, is brainwashed by Big Pharma. Does she want to give the baby autism? Because that's what will happen. She emailed him debunked articles. She texted him horror stories. She preyed on his anxieties, whittling fears into his ear that I, his wife, the mother of his child, was going to willfully harm our daughter. It was a constant draining battle that put a deep and painful crack in our marriage. The years that followed were a blur of 2 more children deployments and Brenda's escalating madness. She would tell Mark I was going to cheat on him while he was gone, that I was wasting his deployment pay. She accused me of everything under the sun, a constant venomous drip poisoning our well. Mark, worn down by years of her manipulation and struggling with his own demons from his time overseas, was trapped. He loved his mother, but he was drowning in her toxicity. Eventually, the weight became too much for him. He agreed to go to an inpatient treatment program for his PTSD. It was the hardest and bravest decision he ever made. It also meant I was alone. 3 kids, ages 5, 3, and 1 in a house 1,000 miles from any family. Just me. It was hard. It was lonely. But we were managing. I was holding our world together with duct tape and caffeine, waiting for my husband to come home healthy. One night, about a month into his treatment, I was on the phone with his Aunt Carol, Brenda's sister, and the one sane person in the Miller family. "You're doing such a good job, Skylar," she said, her voice warm. "I don't know how you're managing it all." "Some days I don't either," I laughed, exhaustion lacing my voice. There was a pause on her end. A hesitation. "What is it, Carol?" "Skylar, honey, I don't know if I should say anything. Just tell me." Another deep breath crackled through the phone. "It's Brenda. She's been calling everyone. The whole family. She's telling them that you're the reason Mark had to go away. She's saying you're a unfit mother. That you're hurting your own children." The phone felt cold against my ear, a conduit for a poison that was finally seeping into my bones and turning them to steel. I thanked Carol, my voice a flat, dead thing, and hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked into the living room where my 5-year-old was building a lopsided Lego tower and my 3-year-old was coloring on a piece of paper and occasionally the floor. The baby was asleep in his crib. I looked at them, my children, my entire world that I had been holding together while their father healed, and I felt a clarity so sharp it could have cut glass. The war wasn't about a stolen hoodie, or a washer and dryer, or even a tax refund. It was about them. She was trying to use my children as the final weapon to destroy me. And I was done being a target. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice sounded lighter than it had in years the therapy was working. I felt a pang of hope immediately followed by dread. "Hey, Sky," he said. "Listen, I'm getting a 7 2-hour pass. My grandpa's taken a turn and the doctors are letting me come home to see him." "Oh, Mark. I'm so sorry about your grandpa," I said, my voice softening. "Of course. When are you flying in?" "Tomorrow night. And listen, I've been thinking a lot in here. About communication, about forgiveness. I think since I'll be in town anyway, I should go see my mom. Maybe we can finally just make the peace." The steel in my bones solidified into adamantium. "You can see your mother, Mark. That's your choice." He let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Sky. That means a lot. I was thinking maybe I could swing by with the kids for an hour just so she can see them. It would mean the world to her." "No." The word was quiet, but it hung in the air between us like a guillotine. "What?" he asked, his lighter tone vanishing. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. You are free to have whatever relationship you want with your mother. I will not stop you. But she is not seeing our children. Not for an hour. Not for 5 minutes. Not ever again. Skylar, that's not fair, he protested, his voice rising. She's their grandmother. She's a viper who has spent the last month while you've been gone, and I've been alone with 3 kids, calling every member of our family to tell them I am an unfit mother who is hurting my own children. I said my voice as calm and cold as a morgue slab. She doesn't get to do that and then get a visit with those same children as a reward. The door is closed. I've locked it and thrown away the key. So you're just going to cut her out. What about the kids? Don't they deserve a grandmother? They deserve a mother who isn't being systematically destroyed by her. They deserve to not be used as pawns in her sick game. This conversation is over. I hung up before he could respond. He arrived the next night, the air in our home thick with unspoken arguments. He kissed the kids, his face a mask of strained joy, and put them to bed. As soon as the last bedroom door was shut, he turned on me. We need to talk about this, Skylar. There's nothing to talk about. I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my movements sharp and efficient. Damn it, stop that and look at me, he snapped. His voice was raw. You're being hateful and you're holding grudges. That's all this is. She's my times mother, asterisk. You want to punish her, so you're using our children to do it. I slammed the sponge into the sink and turned my eyes blazing. Punish her, a grudge. Do you have any idea how small that makes this sound? A grudge is what you hold when someone cuts you off in traffic. A grudge is for a petty disagreement. This is not that. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. This is a decade of sustained psychological warfare, Mark. She called my husband's military command over a joke. She called me Kansas trash. She tried to stop my parents from giving us a gift. She stole thousands of dollars from our bank account. She waged a multi-year campaign to convince you that I was going to intentionally harm our children with life-saving medicine based on her holistic bullshit. And while you were gone, getting help for the very trauma she helped inflict on you, she told our family that I was abusing our kids. I was inches from his face, now my voice, a venomous whisper. This is not a grudge. This is a diagnosis. Your mother is a narcissist with a personality disorder, and I am done letting her sickness infect this house. My only priority is protecting those 3 people sleeping down the hall. I will not offer them up as a sacrifice on the altar of your mother's ego, so you can pretend we're a happy, normal family. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. She loves them. She would never hurt them. She is hurting them times, through me times, I countered. She has tried to destroy their mother. She has tried to break up their parents' marriage. What part of that is love? A happy, stable mother is the best thing I can give my kids, and I am never stable after being in her orbit. Therefore, she's a threat to my children's well-being. It's that simple. He just stared at me, his face a mess of confusion and anger. The programming ran deep. He saw his mother, the woman who raised him. I saw the monster who had meticulously tried to dismantle my life. They're the ones who will suffer, Sky, he said, his voice pleading. They'll miss out on having a grandmother. They will miss out on being manipulated, I corrected him. They will miss out on being told their mother is garbage. They will miss out on having love offered and then withdrawn on a whim. Believe me, they'll thank me for it later. He turned away and pulled out his phone. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to call her. To explain. To apologize for my behavior. To manage her emotions just like he'd been trained to do his whole life. I didn't say another word. I just watched him for a second, a stranger in our kitchen. Then I turned, walked down the hall, and quietly pushed open the door to my daughter's room. I checked on my other two boys, their small chests rising and falling in the dim glow of their nightlights. My job was to protect them. I went back to the living room and saw him on the couch, phone pressed to his ear, his back to me. Mom, listen. She's just stressed out. I walked right past him, scooped up the baby monitor from the end table and went into my bedroom. I closed the door, shutting out the sound of his voice. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a boundary finally holding. A wall finally being built. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, locked door. It was the simple, brutal, and necessary act of choosing my children and myself over the woman who had tried to burn us all to the ground. The rift between Mark and me was now a canyon, and I didn't know if we'd ever build a bridge to cross it. But for the first time in a decade, I felt safe on my side.
Story teen.
I'm not asking Eleanor, I'm begging. My mom's voice on the phone had that specific pitch it gets when she's trying to leverage a lifetime of maternal sacrifice for a 10-minute favor. Mandy's sitter just canceled. It's her and David's anniversary. You'd be saving their lives. I stared at my ceiling, my glorious empty Friday night stretching before me like a promised land. A land of pizza, bad movies, and zero responsibility. Mom, I don't know anything about toddlers. Leo's, 4? And Maya's 2? I watch teenagers on TV? That's the extent of my childcare knowledge. It's just for a few hours. They'll probably be asleep most of the time, she said, a lie so blatant we both knew it. I'll add $50 to your allowance. The $50 was a low blow. It was a direct hit on my I need a new graphics card fund. Fine, I sighed. But if the house burns down, it's on you. An hour later, I was standing in my brother David's entryway, which smelled faintly of disinfectant and desperation. Mandy was buzzing around, grabbing a purse and shoving her feet into heels that looked like instruments of torture. Okay, so their schedule is on the fridge, she said, talking a mile a minute. Snacks are in the pantry, but only the organic apple puffs. No juice after 7, it makes Leo hyper. Maya's favorite show is Llama Llama Boom Boom, which is honestly the most annoying thing you will ever hear, but it keeps her quiet. Any questions? What do I do if they misbehave? I asked. It seemed like a reasonable question. Mandy paused her hand on the doorknob. She gave a tight little laugh. Oh, they're angels. They won't. Just keep them happy. She glanced at her watch. David's waiting in the car. Have fun. Then she was gone. The silence lasted for about 4 seconds. Then a small human cannonball, who I assumed was Leo, launched himself from the top of the stairs, landing on the sofa with a thud that shook the floor. He was followed by a tinier, squealing echo Maya, who promptly tried to copy him and face-planted on a cushion. We're playing Volcano, Leo announced, pointing a sticky finger at me. You're the hot lava. Okay, I said, trying to sound like a fun, capable babysitter. Rules of the volcano. There are no rules, he shrieked with glee, and proceeded to prove it by pulling every single cushion off the couch and throwing them onto the floor. Maya, his loyal apprentice, started ripping pages out of a magazine and scattering them like confetti. This was not keeping them happy. This was surviving the apocalypse. I managed to wrangle them to the kitchen table with the promise of the organic apple puffs. They took one look at the beige airy crisps and revolted. I want chippies, Leo demanded, crossing his little arms. Chippies, Maya echoed, banging her fists on the table. Mandy said, just these puffs, I tried to reason. Leo's face crumpled. His bottom lip trembled and his eyes filled with water. It was the wind-up to a tantrum of epic proportions. I saw my peaceful evening, my $50, my very sanity flashing before my eyes. Okay, chippies, I said, caving instantly. I found a bag of potato chips in the pantry, ripped it open, and dumped a pile on each of their plates. The crying stopped on a dime. They were happy. I was following orders. The next hour was a blur of similar negotiations. I wanted to put on a Disney movie. They wanted to watch a YouTube video of some guy unboxing toys for 45 minutes straight. The YouTube video won. I suggested we play with blocks. They decided it was more fun to empty the entire toy box onto the living room rug and then ignore it. I was less of a babysitter and more of a hostage negotiator who kept losing. The real trouble started when Leo discovered the art supplies. It was a bin filled with crayons, markers, and glitter glue. "Let's draw," I said, relieved. A quiet sitting down activity. I spread out some paper on the coffee table. Leo took a thick red crayon, looked me dead in the eye, and walked straight to the big beige living room wall. "No, no, sweetie," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Paper. We draw on paper." He ignored me. With a triumphant grin, he dragged the crayon across the paint, leaving a waxy, blood-red gash. Maya, seeing her brother's masterpiece, grabbed a blue marker and scribbled a chaotic circle next to it. "Okay, that's enough," I said, my tone shifting from fun babysitter to panicked fraud. I gently tried to take the crayon from Leo. He screamed. It wasn't a normal kid scream. It was a piercing, guttural shriek that vibrated through my bones. He dropped to the floor, kicking his legs and pounding his fists. "My crayon, it's mine!" Maya, in solidarity, threw the blue marker across the room. It hit a picture frame with a crack. My mind went blank. I had no tools for this. What did adults do? I tried to picture my own childhood. Vague images of being sent to my room surfaced. A timeout. That was a thing, right? "Leo," I said, trying to sound firm over his wails. "If you draw on the walls and scream, you have to have a timeout." I pointed to a small armchair in the corner of the room. "You need to sit there for 2 minutes and calm down." He just screamed louder, arching his back. I made a terrible split-second decision. I hooked my hands under his arms and lifted him. He went rigid, all flailing limbs and fury. He was surprisingly strong. I half carried, half dragged him over to the chair and sat him down. "You stay here," I commanded, feeling my heart pound. He stayed for exactly 1 second before scrambling off the chair and running, still screaming, into the kitchen. I chased after him. He grabbed the bag of chips from the table and, in a final act of defiance, dumped the entire thing onto the floor. A salty, greasy explosion of crumbs and broken chips. Maya, who had been watching the whole spectacle with wide, silent eyes, promptly burst into tears. So there I was, standing in a trash living room with crayon on the walls, a broken picture frame, and a kitchen floor covered in potato chips. Leo was hiding under the table, growling like a feral animal, and Maya was crying so hard she was making hiccuping sound. I felt the $50 wasn't just unearned. I probably owed them money for damages. I sank onto the floor, put my head in my hands, and just breathed. What was I supposed to do? Let them destroy the house to keep them happy? That couldn't be right. I was trying to formulate a new plan, any plan, when I heard a key in the front door. My blood ran cold. It was only 9 o'clock. They weren't supposed to be back for hours. The door swung open and Mandy stepped inside, a smile on her face. "Hey, we decided to cut it short and just grab dessert to go." Her voice died in her throat. Her smile vanished. She took in the scene. The overturned cushion fort. The magazine confetti. The crying toddler on the floor and the chips scattered across the kitchen tile. Her eyes finally landed on the big red waxy scar on her perfect beige wall. Her gaze lifted from the crayon mark and found me sitting defeated on the floor. Her expression was perfectly still, but her eyes were brewing a storm. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice dangerously quiet. Leo, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure, stopped growling and scurried out from under the table. He ran to his mom and buried his face in her legs. Maya's crying intensified, becoming a performance piece for the new audience. I tried to put him in a timeout, I said, getting to my feet. My voice was shaky. He drew on the wall, so I told him to sit in the chair. Mandy's eyes flicked from the wall to me, to the armchair in the corner, as if connecting pieces of evidence at a crime scene. The anger I expected to see about the trashed house wasn't there. It was being replaced by something colder, sharper. "You what?" A timeout, I repeated, confused. He was screaming and drawing on the wall. I didn't know what else to do. You don't do times anything, Time, she hissed, taking a step toward me. That's what you do. You are not his mother. You don't discipline my son. I was floored. He was destroying your house. I was trying to stop him. By physically restraining him, by punishing him, her voice was rising now, a venomous crescendo. His job is to be a child. Your job is to make sure he doesn't swallow a battery or run into traffic. That's it. You need to learn your place, Eleanor. My brother David finally shuffled in the door behind her, holding a little white bag that probably contained some overpriced slice of cheesecake. He stopped dead, his eyes wide, as he took in the wreckage. He looked from Mandy's furious face to my stunned one, opened his mouth as if to say something and then promptly closed it. A profile in courage. My place? I asked, my own anger starting to bubble up. Your kids are out of control. They are spirited, she snapped. And you have no idea what you're doing. Just get your things. She pulled her wallet from her purse, slapped $50 into my hand, and turned her back on me, kneeling to comfort her perfect-spirited little vandal. I grabbed my jacket, shot a look of pure disgust at my brother's silent, useless form, and walked out the door. The following Friday, my phone rang. The caller ID said Mandy. I stared at it until it went to voicemail. A minute later, a text popped up. Mandy? Call me? Emergency? I sighed and hit the call button. Eleanor, thank God, she said, her voice dripping with a frantic sweetness that set my teeth on edge. Listen, I am in a massive bind. Jessica just came down with the flu, and David and I have non-refundable tickets to a concert. No, I said. The line went quiet. No. No, Mandy. Last week you told me I needed to learn my place. I think my place is here in my house, not getting screamed at in yours. Look, I was stressed, she said quickly. The house was a mess. Leo was upset. I overreacted. I'm sorry. Please, Ellie. I'll pay you double. $100. Just for a few hours. $100. That wasn't just a graphics card. That was half my savings for a new monitor. I could feel my resolve crumbling. I don't know, I hedged. I promise I won't get mad. Just stick to the rules this time. My rule. An idea began to form in my mind. A beautiful, terrible, malicious idea. Okay, I said slowly, but let's be perfectly clear on this rule. You want me to keep them safe, but I am not under any circumstances to discipline them. Right. No. No timeouts. No taking things away. No redirecting them if they're doing something you wouldn't like. My only job is to prevent mortal injury and keep them happy. Exactly, she said, relieved. You get it. Just keep them happy. That's all I ask. Deal, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I'll be there at 7. When I arrived, Mandy gave me a hug that felt like being embraced by a tense skeleton. You're a lifesaver, she said. Just following the rules, I replied with a cheerful smile. The moment the door closed, Leo picked up a toy truck and hurled it at the television. It bounced off the screen with a loud thud. Last week, I would have lunged for the truck. This week, I just watched. Hey, Leo, I said brightly. Can you check if that left a mark? My eyes aren't so good from over here. He looked at me confused by the lack of scolding, then ran to the screen to inspect it. No mark. He lost interest. Maya, meanwhile, had found a Costco-sized roll of paper towels in the kitchen. She pulled the end and started running. I followed her at a leisurely pace as she unwound a fluffy white banner through the living room, around the dining table, and into the hallway. What a fun parade, Maya, I chirped. Just be careful not to trip. She giggled and kept running. An hour later, they decided they were hungry. They didn't want apple puffs. They wanted to make soup. Leo dragged a dining chair to the kitchen counter and climbed up. Okay, I said, standing beside him. Rule 1 of soup, no cleaning products, and the water can't be hot. I turned the tap to a safe, lukewarm trickle. He turned on the garbage disposal, which roared to life. Into the sink went a half-full bottle of ketchup, a fistful of flour from the canister, 2 yogurts, and a handful of shredded cheese. Maya stood on another chair, tearing up slices of bread and dropping them in like confetti. They stirred the pink lumpy sludge with a pair of tongs. The disposal ground and gurgled. The sink overflowed, sending a creamy, vaguely pink tide across the granite countertop and onto the floor. Looks delicious, I said, moving the floor mat so they wouldn't slip. You guys are great chefs. They were deliriously, ecstatically happy. And perfectly safe. The masterpiece was the living room fort. It wasn't just the couch cushions this time. They wanted every pillow and blanket in the house. I helped them drag the duvet from my brother and Mandy's perfectly made king-size bed. I helped them pull the decorative throws off the armchairs. We used the dining chairs as support beams and the silk curtains as a majestic floor-to-ceiling doorway. They emptied the toy box inside, then decided the fort needed decorations. This involved squeezing the contents of several juice boxes onto the cushions to make paint. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance, munching on the potato chips they had rejected. I was a UN peacekeeper, a neutral observer, a highly paid safety inspector. I didn't say no. I didn't say stop. I didn't say don't. When Maya tried to climb the bookshelf, I simply said, "That looks wobbly, sweetie. Maybe try climbing the fort instead. It's much safer." She did. By 10 o'clock, the house looked like it had been looted by a gang of very sticky, very short pirates. The paper towel parade route was now a slip and slide of spilled juice and yogurt. The kitchen sink was a biohazard. The living room was an apocalyptic shantytown built from their finest linens. When I heard the key in the door, I felt a serene calm wash over me. Mandy stepped inside mid-laugh at something David had said. The laugh caught in her throat. She froze. Her eyes scanned the scene from the soupy kitchen floor to the defiled state of her living room. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint times drip, drip, drip times from the kitchen counter. What, she began, her voice a strangled choke. The hell happened? I unfolded myself from the one clean patch of carpet. Hi, guys. They had a great time. A great time, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the yogurt-smeared duvet. My house, what did you do? I did exactly what you told me to. I said, my voice even and calm. I kept them safe and I kept them happy. I didn't discipline them. Not once. I ticked off the points on my fingers. When they wanted to make soup in the sink, I made sure they didn't use poison or hot water. When they wanted to make a fort, I made sure it was structurally sound. They were happy, Mandy. Look how happy they are. Leo and Maya were asleep inside their grimy fortress, looking like 2 blissful little angels. Mandy stared at me, her face a mask of incandescent rage. David just stood behind her, his mouth hanging open, looking utterly defeated by the scene. You're not getting paid for this, she seethed. A deal's a deal, I said, holding out my hand. $100. Get out of my house. Pay me first. David, in his first and only useful act of the evening, reached into his wallet, pulled out 5 $20 bills, and pushed them into my hand, refusing to meet my eyes. I walked home. The next morning, my parents cornered me at the breakfast table. Mandy had called, of course. "We are very disappointed in you, Eleanor," my dad said, his arms crossed. "You were spiteful and immature," my mom added. "There's a difference between following a stupid rule and letting children destroy a house. You could have read them a book. Played a game." "Reading a book they don't want to read is a form of discipline," I stated flatly, pouring milk over my cereal. "So is telling them they can't play a game they invented themselves?" Mandy's rule was no discipline. I followed the rule. The results are her problem, not mine. My mom shook her head. "It was malicious." "Yep," I said, taking a bite. "It was." They were furious, but they couldn't argue with my logic. They knew Mandy. They knew how she was. But I was her teenage sister-in-law. And she was the mother. I was the one who was supposed to bend. But I hadn't. I'd followed her orders to the letter. All I'd done was hold up a mirror. And as for my brother David, I hadn't heard a single word from him. Not a text, not a call. He had let his wife scream at me the first time, and he'd stood by and watched the fallout this time. He was completely, utterly absent. I looked at the $100 on my desk later that day. The first $50 was for babysitting. The second $50, that was for the lesson. And it was worth every single penny.